I, Rowan Blackthorn, take you, Elena Harrow, to be my wife. The cathedral echoed with hollow vows. But before the applause could fade, the Duke leaned close to his new bride and whispered 6 words that would shatter her world. Don't expect warmth from this marriage. This is the story of a woman trapped in a gilded cage, married to a man carved from ice, and the explosive moment she chose to walk away, forcing a ruthless Duke to his knees. If you want to see how a broken marriage becomes an epic love story, stay until the very end. Drop a like and tell us what city you're watching from. The morning of her wedding, Elena Harrow stood before a mirror that had belonged to her grandmother and tried to remember what hope felt like. The dress was exquisite, layers of ivory silk that caught the light like morning frost, hand-stitched pearls cascading down the bodice in patterns that resembled falling snow. Her mother had wept when she first saw it. Her father had simply nodded, his jaw tight, his eyes refusing to meet hers. "You look beautiful, darling," her mother said now, adjusting the veil for the 3rd time, her hands trembling slightly. Like an angel. Elena didn't feel like an angel. She felt like a chess piece being moved across a board she couldn't see. "Mother," she said quietly, watching their reflections in the antique glass. "Did you love Father when you married him?" The hands stilled. Her mother's face, still lovely despite the lines that grief and worry had carved there, went carefully blank. "Love comes in many forms, Elena. Sometimes it grows, like a garden. And sometimes you learn to live without it." The words settled over Elena like snow, cold, silent, suffocating. An hour later, she stood at the cathedral entrance, her arm threaded through her father's, and understood with perfect clarity that she was about to make the greatest mistake of her life. The Cathedral of St. Aurelius was magnificent, all soaring arches and stained glass that painted the stone floors in jeweled light. Every pew was filled with nobility, merchants, politicians. The Harrow family had called in every favor, leveraged every connection to secure this match. Duke Rowan Blackthorn was the most powerful man in 3 provinces, a man whose word could topple merchants or elevate paupers, whose estates stretched across horizons like kingdoms, and he was about to become her husband. "Smile," her father muttered. "You're representing our entire family." Elena smiled. She'd been practicing that particular expression for weeks. Serene, demure, appropriately grateful. It felt like wearing a mask made of glass. The organ swelled, the crowd rose, and Elena began the longest walk of her life. Rowan Blackthorn stood at the altar like a monument, 6 feet of rigid posture and aristocratic indifference. His dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved by an artist obsessed with sharp angles and cold perfection. His eyes, a pale gray that reminded Elena of winter skies before a storm, tracked her approach with all the warmth of a tax assessor evaluating property. Because that's what this was, wasn't it? A transaction. A merger of interests. The Harrow family needed his influence to save their failing textile business. Rowan needed, well, Elena wasn't entirely sure what he needed. A wife to appear at social functions? An heir to secure the Blackthorn line? Whatever it was, it certainly wasn't her. She reached the altar. Her father released her arm with what might have been relief. Rowan didn't smile, didn't offer his hand, just stood there, waiting, as the bishop began the ceremony in a voice that resonated through the cathedral like distant thunder. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." Elena barely heard the words. She was too focused on breathing, on standing upright, on not betraying the panic that clawed at her ribs with every passing second. This was wrong. Everything about this was wrong. "Duke Blackthorn," the bishop intoned, "do you take this woman?" "I do." His voice was flat, businesslike. He might as well have been signing a contract. "And do you, Elena Harrow?" She opened her mouth. For one wild moment, she considered saying no. Just no. Turning around, running down that long aisle, bursting through those massive doors into sunlight and freedom. But 300 people were watching. Her family's entire future hung on this moment. And where would she even go? "I do." The words tasted like ash. Rowan slid a ring onto her finger, platinum, set with a diamond so large it felt like wearing a stone. Cold metal against cold skin. His hands didn't linger. I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. This was it. The moment when she'd imagined, foolishly, she now realized, that something might shift, that she'd see a flicker of warmth in those winter eyes, feel some small connection, some hint that this marriage might become something more than a business arrangement. Rowan leaned in. For a heartbeat, she thought he might actually kiss her properly, put on a show for the crowd at least. Instead, his lips barely grazed her cheek, a touch so brief and cold it might have been the brush of snow. And then he was straightening, turning toward the crowd, his expression as empty as it had been at the start. But he wasn't quite finished. As the organ thundered to life and applause rippled through the cathedral, Rowan leaned close one more time, his mouth next to her ear, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Don't expect warmth from this marriage, Elena. You're here to fulfill a duty, nothing more. Then he took her arm and began walking her down the aisle, his grip firm but impersonal, like he was escorting a stranger through a crowded room. Elena kept smiling, kept walking, kept breathing. But inside, something fundamental had shifted. In that single moment, with those cold words delivered like a business memo, she understood exactly what her life was about to become. A prison with silk walls and a husband who saw her as an obligation. The reception was held at Blackthorn Manor, an estate so vast it had its own horizon. The main house loomed against the sky like a fortress, all dark stone and sharp towers, windows that glinted like suspicious eyes. The grounds stretched for acres, manicured gardens giving way to wild forests that pressed against the property like they were trying to reclaim it. Elena had seen it once before, during the betrothal negotiations. It had intimidated her then. Now, watching it grow larger as their carriage approached, it felt like watching the gates of a penitentiary swing open. Impressive, isn't it? Lady Thornfield, Rowan's aunt, sat across from them in the carriage, her sharp features arranged in what might have been a smile. The Blackthorn family has held this land for 12 generations. Rowan takes that legacy very seriously. Elena glanced at her new husband. He was staring out the window, his profile carved from ice, clearly counting the minutes until this tiresome social obligation was over. It's beautiful, Elena said, because that's what was expected. It's a responsibility, Rowan said without looking at her. One I hope you understand. Lady Thornfield's smile tightened. What my nephew means is that being a Blackthorn Duchess comes with certain expectations, social duties, proper conduct, discretion. That last word hung in the air with particular weight. I understand, Elena said quietly. Good. Lady Thornfield settled back against the cushions. The previous Duchess, Rowan's mother, set quite a high standard. I'm sure you'll do your best to meet it. The previous Duchess had died when Rowan was 12. Elena knew. Some kind of accident involving a fall from a horse. Nobody talked about it much, but the portraits in Blackthorn Manor showed a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. Everything her son was not. The carriage rolled to a stop. Servants appeared like magic, opening doors, extending hands, creating a human corridor from the carriage to the manor's entrance. Rowan stepped down first, paused, extended his hand to Elena with all the enthusiasm of a man performing a military drill. She took it. His fingers were cold even through her gloves. The ballroom was a spectacle, crystal chandeliers dripping light onto marble floors, long tables laden with enough food to feed a village, a string quartet playing in one corner while guests in their finest silks and velvets swirled and laughed and pretended this was a love match. Elena stood beside Rowan in the receiving line, shaking hands, accepting congratulations, smiling until her face ached. He played his part perfectly, the proud groom, the attentive husband, but his hand on her waist felt like iron, and whenever someone turned away, his expression went blank as a shuttered window. Congratulations, Duke Blackthorn. Lord Ashford, a portly man with too much cologne, pumped Rowan's hand enthusiastically. You've secured quite a prize. The Harrow girl is lovely. Thank you, Ashford. Though I must say, I'm surprised you settled down. We all thought you'd remain a bachelor forever, given your particular tastes. Something flickered in Rowan's eyes. My personal life is exactly that. Personal. Lord Ashford chuckled, oblivious. Of course. Though I suppose marriage won't change everything, eh? He actually winked. A man still needs his diversions. Elena felt Rowan's grip on her waist tighten infinitesimally. When he spoke, his voice could have frozen wine. If you'll excuse us, Lord Ashford, my wife and I should greet the other guests. He steered her away with a force just short of bruising. I apologize for Ashford, he said without looking at her. He's a fool who drinks too much and talks more. What did he mean about diversions? Nothing that concerns you. They reached another cluster of guests, and Rowan's public mask slid back into place, polite, dignified, utterly empty. The evening dragged on. Elena danced with her father, who held her too tight and whispered, "You've done well, daughter. This will save us all." She danced with Rowan's business associates, who evaluated her like they were calculating her worth. She danced with Rowan himself, once, a required waltz that felt like moving through choreography with a mannequin. "You're doing well," he said as they turned. "The guests are impressed." How fortunate. His eyes narrowed slightly. Was that sarcasm, Elena? Would it matter if it was? No. He spun her with mechanical precision. But I'd prefer you keep such sentiments private. In public, you're the Duchess of Blackthorn. You represent my family now. And in private? In private, you're free to think whatever you like, so long as you perform your duties. Which are? Appear at my side when required, manage the household, produce an heir. Beyond that, he met her eyes for the first time all evening. We need not trouble each other. The waltz ended. Rowan bowed, she curtsied, and he walked away without another word. Elena stood in the middle of the ballroom, surrounded by celebrating guests, wearing a wedding dress that cost more than most people earned in a year, and felt more alone than she'd ever been in her life. The final guest departed just after midnight. Elena's feet ached from dancing, her face hurt from smiling, and exhaustion pressed against her skull like a vice. The staff will show you to your chambers, Rowan said, already turning toward the stairs. Our chambers? The words came out before she could stop them. He paused, looked back. No. Your chambers. I have my own wing. But we're married. Yes, and we'll fulfill the necessary aspects of that arrangement at appropriate intervals. But I see no reason to share living quarters beyond that. Heat flooded Elena's cheeks, part humiliation, part fury. I see. Do you? He studied her with those cold gray eyes. I want to be very clear, Elena, so there are no misunderstandings. This marriage is a strategic alliance. I need a duchess to manage my social obligations. You need the protection and resources of my name. That is the extent of our relationship. And if I want more, then I suggest you adjust your expectations. He started up the stairs again. Mrs. Crawford will show you to your rooms. She'll go over your schedule in the morning. I leave for the northern estates at dawn and will be gone for 2 weeks. Try not to create any scandals in my absence. He was gone before she could formulate a response. Mrs. Crawford appeared at Elena's elbow, a thin woman in her 50s with iron gray hair and a face that suggested she'd long since given up being surprised by anything. This way, Your Grace. Elena followed her through corridors that seemed to stretch forever, past portraits of stern-faced Blackthorns who all had Rowan's eyes, through halls decorated with dark wood and darker tapestries depicting hunting scenes and battles. The Duke has always kept his own quarters, Mrs. Crawford said, as they climbed a different staircase. His father did the same. It's tradition in the Blackthorn family. What happened to his mother? Elena asked. The previous Duchess? Mrs. Crawford's expression went carefully neutral. An accident, Your Grace. A terrible accident. The Duke doesn't speak of it. They reached a set of carved double doors. Mrs. Crawford pushed them open, revealing a suite of rooms that would have been magnificent if they hadn't felt so much like a gilded cage. The bedroom was enormous. A 4-poster bed draped in midnight blue silk, wardrobes of dark wood, windows that overlooked the gardens. Through an archway was a sitting room with a fireplace, bookshelves, delicate furniture that looked like it had never been used. Your maid will be Lily, Mrs. Crawford continued. She'll help you dress and attend to your needs. Breakfast is at 8. The Duke expects the household to run on schedule. Even when he's not here? Especially when he's not here. Mrs. Crawford moved to the window, adjusting curtains that didn't need adjusting. If I may offer some advice, Your Grace, please. Don't expect softness from Duke Blackthorn. He's not built that way. His father raised him to see everything as a transaction. People, relationships, even family. If you try to change him, you'll only hurt yourself. Elena sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly too tired to stand. Then what should I do? Survive, Mrs. Crawford said simply. Find your own purpose here. Make a life within the life he's given you. It's what the smart ones do. After she left, Elena sat in silence, listening to the manor settle around her, creaks and groans like an old beast shifting in its sleep. She thought about her mother's words. Sometimes you learn to live without it. She thought about Rowan's cold dismissal. Don't expect warmth. She thought about the rest of her life stretching ahead like an empty corridor with no doors. And then, because she was tired and frightened and more alone than she'd ever been, Elena Harrow, now Elena Blackthorn, curled up on top of her wedding dress and cried until dawn painted the windows gray. She woke to someone gently shaking her shoulder. Your Grace? I'm so sorry to wake you, but it's nearly 8, and Mrs. Crawford said you'd want to be dressed for breakfast. Elena blinked up at a young woman with kind eyes and nervous hands. Lily, she remembered. It's all right, Elena said, her voice rough from crying. Help me out of this dress. It took 20 minutes to unlace her from the wedding gown. In daylight, it looked even more beautiful and utterly wrong, like armor for a battle she'd already lost. Lily helped her into a simpler dress, pale blue with minimal decoration, brushed out her hair, made her look presentable. Is the Duke at breakfast? Elena asked. Oh no, Your Grace. He left before dawn. Took his horse and 2 guards. Said he'd be back in a fortnight. Of course he had. Why waste time on a wife who was just a business arrangement? Elena made her way to the breakfast room, another cavernous space with a table that could seat 20 and currently held only her. A servant materialized to pour tea. Another brought a plate of food she had no appetite for. She was picking at toast when Lady Thornfield swept in. Good morning, Elena. I trust you slept well? Well enough. Excellent. Lady Thornfield helped herself to tea with the ease of someone who'd lived in this house far longer than Elena. Now, we should discuss your duties. Running a household this size is no small task, but I'm sure you're up to it. For the next hour, Lady Thornfield outlined Elena's new life in excruciating detail. There were social obligations, teas to host, charity functions to attend, visiting days where wives of other nobility would come to evaluate her. There were household duties, reviewing menus, managing servants, overseeing maintenance of a manor that apparently required constant attention. There were appearances to maintain, reputations to uphold, 1,000 unspoken rules about what a Blackthorn Duchess could and could not do. And of course, Lady Thornfield concluded, you'll want to stay out of the Duke's personal affairs. He values his privacy. What personal affairs? Lady Thornfield's smile didn't reach her eyes. My nephew is a complex man with complex needs. As long as he's discreet, it's not your concern. Elena set down her teacup with a click that sounded too loud. Are you saying my husband has a mistress? I'm saying that aristocratic marriages and romantic entanglements are rarely the same thing. Surely you understood that before you married him. I understood that I was entering a loveless marriage. I didn't realize it would include humiliation. Only if you choose to see it that way. Lady Thornfield leaned forward. Listen to me, girl. You're young and you still believe in fairy tales, but this is the real world. Rowan has given you security, status, and wealth. In return, he expects you to play your part and not make waves. If you're smart, you'll take what you've been given and be grateful. Elena stood. Her hands were shaking, but she kept her voice steady. Thank you for the advice, Lady Thornfield. If you'll excuse me, I have a household to learn. She walked out before the older woman could respond, her heart hammering against her ribs. In the hallway, she stopped, pressing her palm against the cold stone wall, trying to breathe through the fury and despair warring in her chest. This was her life now. This cold manor, these cold people. and a husband who saw her as nothing more than a convenient fiction. But as she stood there, something hardened inside her, a small, bright core of defiance. If Rowan thought she would simply fade into the wallpaper, perform her duties like a trained dog, and accept whatever scraps of dignity he tossed her way, he was wrong. She didn't know how yet, didn't have a plan. But Elena Harrow, Elena Blackthorne, had not survived her family's financial ruin, her father's desperate schemes, and a childhood of learning to be invisible only to disappear now. She would find a way to survive this too, even if survival meant learning to live in a prison made of ice. The first week passed in a blur of rooms and rules and responsibilities she'd never asked for. Elena learned the manor's geography, the main wing with its formal rooms, the servants' quarters tucked away like secrets, the libraries no one used, the conservatory where plants grew in stubborn defiance of the cold. She learned which servants to trust, Mrs. Crawford, surprisingly, Lily, absolutely, and which watched her with calculating eyes, reporting back to Lady Thornfield or whoever else kept tabs on the new Duchess. She hosted her first tea. 5 aristocratic wives showed up, evaluated her like livestock, made polite conversation that dripped with condescension, and left her feeling like she'd failed a test she hadn't known she was taking. "You did fine," Lily assured her afterward, helping her out of the suffocating formal dress. Lady Morrison is always difficult. She was looking for reasons to criticize. She found plenty. She finds them with everyone. Don't take it personal, Your Grace. But it was personal. Everything was personal when you were trying to build a life out of scraps. The second week, Elena took over the household accounts. Mrs. Crawford had been managing them, but Elena needed something to do with her hands, her mind, the hours that stretched empty and endless. She discovered that Blackthorne Manor was bleeding money in a dozen small ways: merchants overcharging for supplies, servants skimming off the top, repairs being done twice when once would suffice. Nobody had been paying attention. Or maybe nobody had cared. Elena cared. Not because she loved the manor or the Blackthorne name, but because fixing problems gave her purpose, made her feel less like a decoration and more like a person. She renegotiated contracts, fired 2 merchants who'd been cheating them for years, reorganized the supply schedule to reduce waste. Mrs. Crawford watched with cautious approval. The previous Duchess never touched the accounts. She said numbers gave her headaches. "Numbers are just puzzles," Elena said, reviewing the ledger for the 4th time that week. "And I like puzzles. The Duke won't like you changing things. The Duke isn't here." That became her mantra. The Duke isn't here. And he wasn't. 2 weeks became 3. 3 became 4. No letters, no messages, nothing but silence from the northern estates where he'd supposedly gone on business. Elena told herself she didn't care, told herself his absence was a gift, time to establish herself without his cold presence freezing everything around him. But late at night, lying in that enormous bed, she couldn't help wondering if this was her future. A husband who disappeared for months at a time, a marriage that existed only on paper and in public appearances, a life spent waiting for someone who would never come home. Rowan returned on a Thursday in October, riding up to the manor just as the sun set blood-red behind the western hills. Elena was in the conservatory when word reached her. She'd taken to spending evenings there, reading among the plants, finding comfort in green things that grew despite the cold. "The Duke has returned, Your Grace," Lily said, slightly breathless from running. "Mrs. Crawford thought you'd want to know." Elena closed her book. "Thank you, Lily." She should go greet him. That's what a proper duchess would do. Rush to welcome her husband home, smile and curtsy, and pretend his month-long absence hadn't hurt. Instead, she stayed in the conservatory, watching darkness creep through the gardens like spilled ink. Let him come find her. If he cared enough. He didn't. Dinner was served at 7. Elena appeared punctually, dressed in a deep green gown that she knew looked well on her. Rowan was already seated, reading correspondence, barely glancing up when she entered. "Elena." "Rowan." They ate in silence. The only sounds were silver on china and the occasional rustle of paper as he reviewed whatever business had kept him away for a month. Finally, Elena couldn't stand it anymore. "Did your business go well?" "Well enough." "You were gone longer than expected." "Things were more complicated than anticipated." I see. More silence. More eating food that might as well have been sawdust. The household accounts are reorganized, Elena said. I found several inefficiencies and corrected them. We are saving nearly 30% on food and supplies. That got his attention. He looked up, those pale eyes focusing on her with something like actual interest. You've been managing the accounts? Someone needed to. We were being robbed. Mrs. Crawford was being taken advantage of, or possibly was in on it. I haven't decided which. Elena set down her fork. Either way, it's fixed now. Rowan studied her for a long moment. I didn't give you permission to interfere with household management. I didn't realize I needed permission to prevent theft. Everything in this house is my concern, including what you choose to involve yourself in. Heat flooded Elena's chest. I've been here for over a month, alone, managing your household, hosting your social obligations, playing the perfect duchess, while you disappeared without a word. The least you could do is acknowledge that I've done a competent job. Competent? His voice dropped to something dangerous. You think reorganizing a few accounts makes you competent? I think it makes me useful, which is more than you've been. The words hung in the air like smoke. Rowan's expression went flat and cold in a way that made Elena's survival instinct scream run. Useful, he repeated. How generous of you to make yourself useful in my home. Our home. According to the law, we're married. According to the law, everything you have belongs to me, including your usefulness. He stood, napkin falling forgotten to the floor. Let me make something clear, Elena. You're here because I allow it. This household runs the way I decide it runs, and your job is not to fix problems or prove your worth. Your job is to be seen, be silent, and produce an heir. Beyond that, I don't care what you do with your time. He walked out, leaving Elena alone with a table full of food and a heart full of ice-cold fury. She sat there for a long time, staring at her plate, feeling something inside her crystallize into diamond-hard certainty. This wasn't just a loveless marriage. This was a war. And she'd just fired her first shot. The next morning, Elena woke to find a letter slipped under her door. No greeting, no signature. Just 3 lines in Rowan's sharp handwriting. You will attend the Ashford ball on Saturday. Wear something appropriate. Do not embarrass me. She crumpled it and threw it in the fire. Then she went downstairs and told Mrs. Crawford to prepare her finest gown. If Rowan wanted a duchess who would be seen and stay silent, he was going to get exactly that, with a twist he wouldn't see coming. The next 3 days passed in tense silence. Rowan disappeared into his study or rode out to inspect the estates, avoiding her with the dedication of a man dodging plague. Elena threw herself into the household with renewed focus, finding a dozen more problems to fix, a dozen more ways to prove she wasn't just decorative. She discovered that the eastern wing had a leaking roof that nobody had bothered to repair. She arranged for workers to fix it. She found out that 3 elderly servants had been working without proper wages for months because someone, probably Lady Thornfield, had decided they were too old to deserve full pay. Elena corrected that immediately, paying them from household funds and daring anyone to question her. You're making enemies, Mrs. Crawford warned, watching Elena review the staff roster. Lady Thornfield won't like this. Lady Thornfield doesn't run this household, I do. The Duke might disagree. Then he can come tell me himself instead of hiding in his study like a coward. Mrs. Crawford's eyes widened. Your Grace, I'm tired of pretending, Mrs. Crawford. This marriage is a sham. My husband treats me like furniture. His aunt treats me like a child. And everyone in this manor is waiting for me to fail so they can say they knew I wasn't good enough. Elena looked up from the papers. Well, I'm not failing. I'm not disappearing. And I'm certainly not going to apologize for doing my job. The older woman studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, she smiled. A real smile, not the careful, neutral expression she usually wore. The previous Duchess would have liked you. What was she like? Strong, stubborn. She didn't take nonsense from anyone, even the Duke's father. Mrs. Crawford's smile faded. He broke her anyway. Some men are just built to break things. Elena thought about that as she dressed for the Ashford ball. Lily laced her into a gown of deep crimson silk that clung to her figure before falling in elegant folds. Not scandalous, but certainly not demure. Her hair was swept up, exposing her neck and shoulders. She looked like a woman who knew her worth. She looked like someone Rowan couldn't ignore. He was waiting in the entrance hall when she descended the stairs, dressed in formal black that made him look even more like a carved statue. His eyes tracked her descent, and for just a moment, something flickered in that cold gray gaze. Then it was gone. "You're late. By 3 minutes. Punctuality matters. So does courtesy, but you don't seem concerned with that." His jaw tightened. "The carriage is waiting." They rode in silence, the space between them on the bench feeling wider than the distance between continents. Elena watched the countryside roll past. Autumn had stripped the trees bare, leaving skeletal branches clawing at a slate sky. "When we arrive," Rowan said finally, "you will stay by my side. You will smile. You will make pleasant conversation. You will not mention household finances, servant wages, or anything else that might reflect poorly on this family. Of course, heaven forbid anyone know the Duchess of Blackthorn has a brain. I'm warning you, Elena. And I'm acknowledging your warning, Rowan. I'll play my part, just like always." He looked at her then, really looked, and she saw something almost like confusion cross his face, like he couldn't quite figure out who she was, or when she'd stopped being the nervous girl at the altar. Good. Let him wonder. The Ashford estate blazed with light, every window glowing, music spilling out into the night. Carriages lined the drive, disgorging nobility in their finest clothes, everyone competing to outshine everyone else. Rowan helped Elena down with mechanical politeness. His hand on her elbow felt like iron. "Remember what I said." "Every word." They entered together, and Elena felt the room's attention shift toward them like a wave. The Duke and his new bride. Everyone wanted to see if the marriage was as cold as the rumors suggested. Elena smiled and let them look. Lord Ashford greeted them with too much enthusiasm and too much wine. "Blackthorn. And the lovely Duchess, you both look magnificent. Marriage clearly suits you." "Thank you, Lord Ashford," Elena said before Rowan could respond. "Your home is beautiful." "Kind of you to say, though I imagine Blackthorn Manor puts us all to shame, eh?" He leaned in conspiratorially. "I hear you've been quite the busy Duchess, reorganizing things, making changes. Quite modern of you." Elena felt Rowan stiffen beside her. "I believe in efficiency," she said lightly. "Waste bothers me." "Quite right, quite right. A woman of sense. Blackthorn, you're a lucky man." "Indeed," Rowan said, his voice flat as glass. They moved through the crowd, Rowan's hand never leaving her elbow, his grip a constant reminder of control. Elena nodded and smiled and made conversation with people whose names she'd never remember, all while feeling like a marionette on strings. Then she saw her. The woman stood near the terrace doors, partially hidden by a pillar, but not quite hidden enough. She was beautiful in a sharp, calculated way, dark hair swept up, a dress of midnight blue that showed more skin than was strictly appropriate, and eyes that tracked Rowan with predatory focus. When those eyes met Elena's, the woman smiled. Not friendly, knowing. "Who is that?" Elena asked, keeping her voice casual. Rowan didn't even glance over. "No one of importance?" "She's staring at you like she knows you quite well." His fingers dug into her elbow hard enough to bruise. "Drop it." "Is she your—" "I said drop it." He steered her toward a different cluster of guests, his face a mask of polite indifference that didn't match the anger radiating from his grip. Elena let him lead her, let him introduce her to Lord this and Lady that, let him orchestrate her performance like a puppet master working his favorite doll. But she kept watching the woman in midnight blue, and the woman kept watching Rowan. An hour into the ball, Rowan leaned close. "I need to speak with some business associates. Stay here. Don't wander." "Of course." He left her standing by a marble column like a coat he'd temporarily set aside. Elena watched him disappear into the crowd, heading toward a group of older men discussing something with serious faces. She waited exactly 30 seconds. Then she walked straight toward the terrace doors where the woman in midnight blue was standing. Up close, the woman was even more striking, probably 30, with the kind of confidence that came from knowing exactly how beautiful she was and exactly how to use it. "You must be the new Duchess," the woman said, her voice like honey over razors. "I'm Vivian Ashford, Lord Ashford's daughter." Of course she was. That explained the knowing smile, the territorial eyes. "Pleasure to meet you." "Is it?" Vivian sipped her champagne, studying Elena over the rim. "You're younger than I expected, and prettier. No wonder Rowan moved so quickly." "He needed a wife. I needed security. It's a practical arrangement." "How charmingly honest." Vivian's smile sharpened. "Though I wonder if you understand just how practical Rowan can be. He's very good at compartmentalizing his life. Business here, pleasure there, duty somewhere else entirely." Elena's chest tightened, but she kept her expression neutral. "And which compartment do you occupy, Miss Ashford?" "The one he actually enjoys." Vivian set down her glass. "Don't look so stricken, darling. It's not personal. You're his duchess. That's a position of honor. But you'll never be what keeps him warm at night. That's not what you're for." The words hit like physical blows. Elena wanted to throw her drink in this woman's face, wanted to scream, wanted to do something other than stand there taking it. Instead, she smiled. "You know, Miss Ashford, I've learned something interesting since marrying Rowan. The people who talk the most about their importance are usually the ones most afraid of being replaced." She leaned in slightly. "Tell me, does he come to you because he wants to, or because you're convenient?" Vivian's smile froze. "Enjoy your evening," Elena said, and walked away before her hands could start shaking. She made it to the ladies' powder room before the fury and humiliation crashed over her in waves. The room was blessedly empty, just mirrors and velvet chairs and the faint scent of perfume. Elena braced her hands on the marble counter and stared at her reflection. The woman looking back was put together perfectly. Hair immaculate, dress flawless, makeup covering the evidence of sleepless nights. A perfect lie. She was trying to steady her breathing when the door opened and Lady Morrison swept in. The same woman who'd torn apart Elena's first tea with such elegant cruelty. Duchess Blackthorne, what a surprise. "Lady Morrison." Elena straightened, forcing her expression smooth. "I saw you speaking with Vivian Ashford. How delightful. Two such lovely women becoming acquainted." There was malice in her smile. She knew exactly what Vivian was to Rowan. They all did. "Miss Ashford is quite charming." "Oh, she's that and more. She and Rowan have been close for years, since before your marriage, of course. I imagine it must be difficult, being the wife while someone else holds his attention." Elena met her eyes in the mirror. "I imagine it must be exhausting, Lady Morrison, spending so much energy concerning yourself with other people's marriages." "I'm merely observing what everyone can see. Your husband barely looks at you. He disappears for weeks at a time. And meanwhile, Vivian is Lord Ashford's daughter and a guest at this ball. Nothing more." Elena turned to face the older woman directly. "And even if she were more, that's between my husband and myself, not fodder for gossip." Lady Morrison's eyes hardened. "You're quite bold for someone in such a precarious position." "Precarious? You think fixing household accounts and paying servants makes you indispensable? You think acting like you belong will make it true?" She stepped closer. "You're a placeholder, girl. The Harrow family was drowning, and Rowan threw them a rope in exchange for a womb to carry his heir. Once you've done that, you'll be as irrelevant as the furniture." The cruelty was breathtaking, but Elena had spent a month in Blackthorn Manor learning to survive in a house that wanted her gone. She'd learned to build armor from ice. "You're right," she said quietly. "My family was desperate. I married Rowan to save them. But I've discovered something interesting since then, Lady Morrison. Desperation makes you strong. It teaches you to fight. And I have absolutely nothing left to lose." She walked out, leaving Lady Morrison staring after her. The ballroom felt too hot, too crowded, too full of people who saw her as entertainment or pity, or both. Elena pushed through the crowd, looking for air, for space, for anywhere that wasn't here. She found a side door that led to a garden. The cold hit her like a slap, but it was better than suffocating inside. She walked down a gravel path, putting distance between herself and the music and laughter that felt like mockery. Running away? She spun. Rowan stood in the doorway, his face half in shadow. taking air. Is that forbidden too? He stepped into the garden, closing the door behind him. You were supposed to stay put. I'm not a dog, Rowan. No, you're my wife, and you're making a spectacle. By breathing, by walking in a garden, by confronting Vivienne. He crossed the distance between them in 3 strides. What did you say to her? Nothing that wasn't true. Vivienne is your mistress. Yes, I gathered that, along with everyone else at this party. Elena wrapped her arms around herself against the cold. Tell me something. Did you even try to hide it, or did you want me to know? It's not your concern. Not my... She laughed, sharp and bitter. I'm your wife. How is it not my concern? Because that's not what this marriage is about. His voice was hard, final. I told you from the beginning. Don't expect warmth. Don't expect romance. You're here to fulfill a function. And what function is that exactly? Stand there and look pretty while you humiliate me? I'm not humiliating you. You're doing that yourself by caring. The words were like a knife between her ribs. Elena stared at him, this man she'd married, this stranger who treated her like an inconvenience. You're right, she said finally. I am humiliating myself, by hoping you might be something other than the cold bastard everyone says you are. She started back toward the house. He caught her wrist. Elena, let go of me. Listen. No, I'm done listening. I'm done hoping. I'm done pretending this is anything other than what it is. She jerked free. You want a duchess who stays silent and out of the way? Fine. You have her. But don't expect me to care when your mistress smirks at me. Don't expect me to smile when your friends pity me. And don't ever expect me to forgive you for this. She walked away. This time, he didn't follow. The carriage ride home was silent. Rowan stared out one window, Elena out the other, an ocean of unspoken fury between them. When they reached Blackthorn Manor, Elena climbed out without waiting for assistance and went straight to her chambers. Lily helped her out of the crimson dress with gentle hands and worried eyes. Are you all right, Your Grace? I'm fine. You don't look fine. Elena caught her own reflection in the mirror, makeup smudged, eyes too bright, face too pale. She looked like someone who'd lost a battle. Maybe she had. Lily, how long have you worked here? 5 years, Your Grace. Did you know the previous Duchess? Lily's hand stilled on the dress buttons. I was just a kitchen maid then, but I saw her sometimes. What happened to her? The accident. No, what really happened? Lily was quiet for a long moment. Then, she left. Elena turned. What? She tried to leave, packed her things, called for a carriage in the middle of the night, but the Duke's father found out. He stopped her. Lily's voice dropped to almost a whisper. They said she fell from her horse 3 days later, but the stable master swore she was afraid of horses. Wouldn't go near them. Cold poured down Elena's spine. Are you saying? I'm saying the Blackthorns don't let people leave. Not wives, not family. Once you're theirs until you die. After Lily left, Elena sat by the fire, watching flames eat wood, thinking about a woman who'd tried to escape and ended up dead. She thought about Rowan's cold dismissal, his mistress, his cruelty wrapped in perfect manners. She thought about Lady Morrison's words. You're a placeholder. She thought about spending the rest of her life in this manner, invisible and unwanted, slowly disappearing until there was nothing left. And then she thought about something else entirely. The next morning, Elena started planning. Not an escape. That was too dangerous, too likely to fail. But something else. A way to build a life within this prison. A way to become someone who couldn't be dismissed or replaced or forgotten. She started with the estate finances. Not just the household accounts, but everything, the farms, the businesses, the investments that generated the Blackthorn fortune. She requested ledgers from Mr. Pemberton, Rowan's steward, who looked at her like she'd grown a second head. The Duke doesn't typically share those documents with his wife, I'm aware, but I'm requesting them anyway. I'll need to ask, no, you'll need to decide if you want to keep your position, because I'm discovering that a lot of people in this household have been taking advantage of my husband's inattention, and I'm wondering if you're one of them. She got the ledgers by afternoon, What she found made her blood boil. The Blackthorn estates were profitable, yes, but they could be twice as profitable if anyone was actually paying attention. Tenant farmers were being charged rents that hadn't been adjusted in 20 years while crops prices had tripled. Business contracts were hemorrhaging money through poor negotiation. Investments sat dormant when they could be working harder. Rowan had inherited a fortune and was letting it stagnate through sheer negligence. Elena spent the next week buried in numbers. She made lists, charts, proposals. She calculated what the estates could earn with proper management. She drafted new contracts, new rent structures that were fair but profitable, new investment strategies. When Rowan finally emerged from wherever he'd been hiding, she was ready. She found him in his study, reviewing correspondence with the kind of focus that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. "I need to speak with you." He didn't look up. "I'm busy. This concerns the estate finances. Pemberton has been mishandling them for years." Elena set a stack of documents on his desk. "These are my findings. You're losing approximately £40,000 annually through inefficiency, poor contracts, and outdated rent structures. I have proposals for correcting all of it." Now she had his attention. He looked from the documents to her face, those gray eyes sharp. "You've been reviewing the estate finances?" Someone needed to. "That's not my job, my place, my concern." Elena crossed her arms. "You've made it very clear what my job is, Rowan. Be silent, be decorative, stay out of the way. But you never said I couldn't be useful. And I have no intention of sitting in this manner for the next 40 years doing nothing but embroidery and hosting teas." He picked up the top document, scanning it. She watched his expression shift from irritation to something almost like surprise. "These numbers are accurate. I've triple-checked everything. You're being robbed, Rowan. Not by criminals, but by your own negligence." "You're suggesting I raise rents on tenant farmers? Make their lives harder?" "I'm suggesting you charge fair market rates and use the increased revenue to make improvements that benefit everyone. Better roads, better equipment, better infrastructure. A rising tide lifts all boats." He read through more pages, his face unreadable. Finally, "This is thorough. It's what I'm good at. Numbers, strategy, seeing what's broken and fixing it." "Why?" The question caught her off guard. "Why what?" "Why do this? You hate me. You made that clear enough at the Ashford ball. So why spend your time trying to improve my estates?" Elena met his eyes. "Because whether I like it or not, they're my estates too. This is my life now, and I refuse to live it as a useless decoration. If I'm going to be the Duchess of Blackthorn, then I'm going to actually be the Duchess, not some pretty ghost haunting the edges of your life." Something shifted in his expression. Not warmth, nothing close to that, but perhaps the smallest crack in the ice. "I'll review these. That's all I'm asking." She turned to leave. "Elena," she paused. "The household changes you made, the servant wages, the repairs, they were appropriate, overdue even. It wasn't an apology, it wasn't thanks, but from Rowan, it might have been as close as she'd get." "Good to know," she said, and left before he could see how much those few words meant. Over the next month, something strange happened. Rowan started seeking her out. Not for conversation, not for companionship, but for strategy. He'd bring her documents to review, contracts to evaluate, decisions to weigh. At first, Elena thought it was a test, some elaborate way to find fault or prove she was out of her depth. But the questions were genuine, and when she made suggestions, he listened. "The Morrison textile contract is bleeding us dry," she said one evening, reviewing papers in the library while Rowan worked across from her. "They're charging premium rates for mediocre quality. The Morrisons are an old family. Cutting ties would cause problems. So negotiate better terms. You have leverage. Half their business comes from Blackthorn properties. They need you more than you need them." He considered this. "You want me to play hardball with Lady Morrison?" Elena smiled. "I want you to stop letting people take advantage of you just because they have titles." The next week, he renegotiated the Morrison contract, saved £15,000 annually, came back and told her without fanfare just, "You were right about the Morrisons." Small victories, tiny cracks in the wall between them. But the cracks didn't change the fundamental truth. Rowan still disappeared for days, still kept her at arm's length, and still, Elena knew, spent time with Vivian Ashford when he thought no one would notice. The problem was, Elena had started to care. Not about Rowan, she still barely liked the man, but about what they were building together, these small moments of collaboration, about feeling useful and valued for something other than her ability to smile and curtsy. She was finding purpose in this prison, and that made the betrayal hurt worse. It came to a head on a December evening when Elena found a letter on Rowan's desk, not because she was snooping, but because it had been left carelessly open. My dearest R, I grow weary of these stolen moments. Come to me properly or don't come at all. You cannot keep us both. V. Elena's hand shook as she set it down. She wanted to be above this, wanted to not care, but fury and hurt warred in her chest until she couldn't breathe. She found Rowan in the stables preparing to ride out. Probably to her, Elena thought bitterly. We need to talk. I'm about to leave. Now. Something in her voice made him pause. What's this about? Your mistress sent you a letter. I found it. His face went carefully blank. You were going through my correspondence? It was open on your desk. Not that it matters. Everyone knows Rowan. Everyone's known from the start. I'm the only one who was stupid enough to hope you might choose differently. Elena? No. You listen. I've spent 3 months in this manner trying to make this work, trying to be useful, trying to build something that resembles a partnership even if we don't have love. And the whole time you've been running to her, making me a joke, making me pathetic. You're not pathetic. I am, because I care. Because somewhere along the way I started to think maybe we could have something real. Not romance, but respect, partnership. And you can't even give me that. Rowan's jaw tightened. What do you want from me, Elena? I want you to choose, her or me. I'm done being half a wife while some other woman gets the rest of you. You're giving me an ultimatum? I'm giving you a choice, one you should have made 3 months ago. He studied her for a long moment, then, Vivian means nothing. Then end it. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. You're just too much of a coward to do it. His eyes went cold as winter steel. You don't understand the situation. Then explain it to me. No. Why not? Because it's none of your concern. The shout echoed through the stable, making horses shift nervously. Rowan's control cracked just for a moment, showing something raw underneath. You want to know why I keep Vivian in my life? Because she doesn't ask questions, doesn't demand things I can't give, doesn't look at me like I've disappointed her just by existing. I never... You do. Every day. Every time you look at me, I see it. The disappointment. The hope that I'll suddenly become someone I'm not. He grabbed his horse's reins. I told you from the beginning, I can't be what you want. I'm not asking you to be anything except honest. I am being honest. This is who I am. Take it or leave it. Elena felt something inside her finally, irrevocably break. Then I'll leave it, she said quietly. She walked out of the stable, through the manor, up to her chambers. Lily helped her pack with shaking hands and wide eyes. Your Grace, what are you doing? Leaving. But the Duke doesn't care. He's made that abundantly clear. She packed quickly, taking only what she'd brought to this marriage. Let Rowan keep his gifts, his jewels, his pretty cage. She wanted none of it. She was halfway down the stairs, bags in hand, when she ran into Mrs. Crawford. The older woman took one look at her and went pale. No. I'm sorry. You can't leave. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. This marriage is a sham, and I'm done pretending otherwise. The last Duchess. I know what happened. Lily told me, but I'm not her, and I'm not staying just because leaving is dangerous. Elena shifted the bags. Thank you for everything, Mrs. Crawford. You were kind when no one else was. She made it to the front entrance before Rowan appeared, blocking her path. Where are you going? Away. Anywhere that isn't here. You can't leave. Watch me. His face had gone white. Elena, be reasonable. Reasonable? You want me to be reasonable? After months of being ignored and humiliated and treated like I'm invisible? She pushed past him. Get out of my way, Rowan. I forbid it. She laughed, high and bitter. You forbid it? You don't own me. Actually, under law, you own my property and my body, but not my will. And my will is to leave. The carriage was waiting because she'd arranged it hours ago. The driver loaded her bags with professional efficiency while Rowan stood on the steps, fury and something else warring across his face. If you get in that carriage, he said, voice low and dangerous, don't come back. Elena climbed in, settled herself, looked down at him one final time. I won't. The carriage lurched forward, and through the window Elena saw Rowan's face transform, anger collapsing into something that looked almost like panic. He took a step forward, then another. Then he was running. The carriage wheels crunched over gravel, picking up speed. Elena didn't look back, wouldn't let herself. But she could hear him. Footsteps pounding the ground, growing closer despite the horse's acceleration. Stop the carriage! Rowan's voice cut through the December air like a blade. The driver hesitated, pulling slightly on the reins. Don't you dare! Elena called up to him. Keep going. Your Grace, the Duke, is not your employer anymore. I am. Drive. The horses surged forward. Through the window, Elena caught a flash of Rowan still running, his coat flying behind him, his face twisted into something she'd never seen before. Not anger. Something worse. Fear. The manor gates loomed ahead, iron scrollwork against a gray sky. Freedom. Just a few more seconds. A gunshot cracked the air. The horses screamed and reared. The carriage lurched sideways, throwing Elena hard against the door. Her bags tumbled from the seat. The driver was shouting, fighting to control the panicked animals. Through the chaos, Elena saw him. Rowan stood in the middle of the drive, a pistol raised toward the sky, his chest heaving. I said stop. The carriage shuddered to a halt. Elena's heart slammed against her ribs, part fury, part terror. He'd fired a gun, actually fired a gun to stop her from leaving. She shoved open the door and climbed down, her legs shaking. Have you lost your mind? Probably. He lowered the pistol, his hand trembling slightly. Get back in the manor. No. Elena, you just fired a weapon at my carriage. I fired it in the air. There's a difference. Not much of one. She was shouting now, all composure gone. What's next, Rowan? You going to chain me to the walls? Lock me in a tower? How far are you willing to go to keep your unwanted wife in place? You're not unwanted? Then what am I? Because from where I'm standing, you've spent 3 months making it very clear you don't need me, don't want me, and would prefer I disappear into the wallpaper. The driver had gotten the horses under control and was now pointedly staring at the sky, trying to give them privacy. Fat snowflakes had started falling, dusting Rowan's dark hair with white. You can't leave, he said, quieter now. Not like this. Then how? Tell me, Rowan, how am I supposed to leave a marriage where my husband keeps a mistress and treats me like a burden? I don't... He stopped, started again. Vivian isn't my mistress. I read the letter. She wants to be, has wanted to be for years, but she's not. Elena stared at him. You're lying. I'm not. He ran a hand through his hair, dislodging snow. She's complicated. Our families have expectations, but I haven't touched her since our wedding. Why should I believe you? Because I'm telling you the truth. The words came out raw, desperate. I know I've been a bastard. I know I've hurt you, but I haven't been unfaithful. That's not... He broke off, something passing over his face. That's not who I am. Snow fell between them, silent and relentless. Elena wanted to believe him, wanted it with an intensity that scared her, but trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. Even if that's true, she said carefully, it doesn't change anything. You don't want this marriage. You've made that clear from the beginning. I don't know what I want. The admission seemed to cost him. I thought I did. I thought I could keep everything in neat compartments. Business here, duty there, never letting anything touch me. Then you started fixing things, making changes, looking at me like I was more than just the sum of my estates and my title. He took a step closer. You're right. I've been a coward, but not about Vivian. Then what? About you. His voice dropped. About what it would mean if I let you matter. The confession hung between them, fragile as the snowflakes dissolving on Elena's cheeks. She wanted to reach for it, for him, wanted to believe this was the beginning of something real, but she'd learned the cost of hope. It's too late, Rowan. It doesn't have to be. Yes, it does. Because even if I stayed, even if I believed you, nothing would change. You'd still keep me at arm's length, still disappear for weeks, still treat our marriage like a business transaction. She wrapped her arms around herself against the cold. I can't live like that. I won't. Then tell me what you need. I need you to mean it when you say I matter. I need you to choose me over your pride, your fear, whatever it is that keeps you locked away. She met his eyes. Can you do that? The silence stretched. Rowan's face was a mask of conflict, wanting to say yes, unable to guarantee it. That was answer enough. I thought so. Elena turned back to the carriage. Goodbye, Rowan. This time, he didn't try to stop her, just stood there in the falling snow as she climbed back in, and the driver, after a nervous glance at the Duke, urged the horses forward. Elena kept her eyes straight ahead as they passed through the gates, kept them forward as the manor disappeared behind trees and distance, kept them dry through sheer force of will. She'd done it. She'd actually left. Now she just had to figure out where to go. The problem revealed itself within an hour. Elena had money. She'd taken what was left of her dowry, carefully hidden away, but not enough to live independently for more than a few months, and going back to her family wasn't an option. They'd married her off to save themselves. They wouldn't jeopardize that arrangement just because she was unhappy. Where to, Your Grace? The driver asked as they approached a crossroads. Good question. Where did a runaway duchess go? The Riverside Inn, she said finally. It was small, discreet, the kind of place where questions weren't asked. She could stay there while she figured out her next move. The inn was everything she'd hoped, plain, clean, anonymous. The innkeeper took her money without comment, showed her to a small room on the second floor, and left her to her thoughts. Elena sat on the narrow bed and tried to process what she'd just done. She'd left her husband, walked away from Blackthorn Manor, from security, from the only plan she'd ever had. She should feel free. Instead, she felt terrified. A knock on the door made her jump. Yes? Letter for you, miss. The innkeeper's voice was carefully neutral. Elena opened the door. The woman handed her a sealed envelope, heavy paper with the Blackthorn crest pressed into wax. Man on a horse brought it, said it was urgent. Her hand shook as she broke the seal. Elena, don't come back to the manor. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. I've sent funds to the Riverside Inn under your name, enough to keep you comfortable while you decide what you want. I meant what I said. You're not unwanted, but you're right that I don't know how to want anyone without destroying them. My father taught me that love is weakness, that caring gives people power over you. I've lived by that principle my entire life. I don't know if I can change. I don't know if I should try. But you deserve better than what I've given you, better than cold dinners and colder words, better than a husband who can't separate duty from desire. Take the money. Take your freedom. Build whatever life you want. I won't stop you again. Well, Elena read it 3 times. Each word felt like a small death, the death of hope she hadn't realized she still carried. He was letting her go, giving her money and freedom and everything she'd asked for, everything except what she'd actually needed. She crumpled the letter and threw it in the fireplace, watched ink and paper curl into ash. Then she cried. For the marriage that never was. For the man who couldn't love, for herself, for wanting him anyway. The next morning, Elena woke with a plan. If Rowan thought sending money would solve everything, he was wrong. She didn't want his charity, didn't want to build a life on his guilt. She wanted her own power. The Harrow family textile business had been failing when Elena married. That was the whole reason for the match. But she'd spent 3 months learning the Blackthorn finances, learning how businesses actually worked. She'd seen what was broken in her family's company, and she knew how to fix it. All she needed was capital. Elena counted the money Rowan had sent. Substantial, but not enough for what she had in mind. She'd need investors, partners, people willing to take a risk on a woman with no experience and a scandal brewing around her abandoned marriage. It was impossible, which meant it was exactly the kind of problem Elena had learned to solve. She spent the next week in the inn's common room, reading newspapers, making notes, drafting plans. The textile industry was changing. New machinery, new techniques, new markets. The Harrow Company had been trying to compete the old way. That's why they'd failed. But if someone modernized the operation, streamlined production, targeted the growing middle class instead of just the aristocracy, it could work. It could actually work. The problem was convincing anyone to listen to her. Elena tried approaching banks first. That went about as well as expected. Mrs. Blackthorne. It's Duchess, actually. The banker, a thin man with suspicious eyes, barely glanced up from her proposal. Duchess. Right. The thing is, we don't typically extend credit to women, particularly women in your situation. My situation being? Separated from your husband, living in an inn, trying to revive a failed family business. He slid the papers back across the desk. It's too much risk. The numbers are solid. I'm sure they are, but numbers aren't the issue. Propriety is. She tried 3 more banks, got 3 more rejections, each one more condescending than the last. By the end of the week, Elena was running out of options and running low on the anger that had fueled her initial momentum. Maybe this was foolish. Maybe she should take Rowan's money, find some quiet town where no one knew her, and live out her days in respectable obscurity. Then she met Charlotte Webb. It happened by accident. Elena was in a coffee house, reviewing her rejected proposals for the dozenth time, when a woman sat down across from her without invitation. "You're Elena Blackthorne." Elena looked up. The woman was perhaps 40, dressed in practical clothes that still managed to look expensive, with sharp eyes that didn't miss much. "Do I know you?" "No, but I know you. Or rather, I know about you." The woman extended her hand. "Charlotte Webb. I own Webb & Sons Manufacturing, and I've been hearing interesting rumors about the Duke's runaway wife." Elena's defenses went up. "I'm not interested in gossip." "Neither am I. I'm interested in this." Charlotte tapped the proposal papers. "I saw you get rejected by Hartley's Bank yesterday. Watched them dismiss you without even reading your full proposal. You were following me?" "I was curious. A duchess trying to raise capital for a textile venture? That's unusual enough to investigate." Charlotte signaled for coffee. "So, tell me why you think you can save the Harrow Company when your own family couldn't." "Because I'm not my family." "Elaborate." Elena hesitated. Then, figuring she had nothing to lose, she launched into her pitch. The problems with the Harrow operation, the opportunities in the changing market, the specific improvements she'd make, the projected returns. Charlotte listened without interrupting. When Elena finished, she sat back and studied her. "That's actually good. Better than good. You've clearly done your research. Then why won't anyone invest?" "Because you're a woman trying to do business in a man's world. And worse, you're a scandal. A duchess who left her duke." Charlotte smiled. "But here's the thing about scandals. They make people nervous. And nervous people make mistakes." "I don't understand." "Your husband is Rowan Blackthorne, one of the most powerful men in the region. The fact that you walked away from him, that makes you either very brave or very stupid. Either way, it makes you interesting." She leaned forward. "I'll invest in your venture. £50,000. Elena's breath caught. "Why?" "Because I started with nothing. Built my company from the ground up in a world that told me I couldn't. And I like backing women who remind me of myself." Charlotte's smile sharpened. Plus, the look on the Hartley brothers' faces when they realized they passed on a winning investment, that'll be worth every penny. They shook hands, drew up contracts. Within 2 weeks, Elena had her funding. Within a month, she'd taken over the Harrow textile factory and started implementing changes. The workers were skeptical at first. A woman running the operation? A duchess playing at business? But Elena showed up every day, learned every aspect of production, worked alongside them until her hands were as stained as theirs. She installed new machinery, restructured the workflow, negotiated better contracts with suppliers, started producing modern designs that middle-class buyers actually wanted instead of the elaborate, expensive styles that only aristocrats could afford. It was exhausting. It was exhilarating. It was hers. And for the first time since her wedding, Elena felt like herself. The scandal, of course, was enormous. The Duchess of Blackthorn, living in an inn, running a factory, working like a common laborer. Society was scandalized. The gossip papers had a field day. Lady Morrison wrote her a letter so venomous it could have killed. Elena didn't care. She was too busy proving everyone wrong. The first real profit check came 3 months after she'd left Blackthorn Manor. It wasn't huge, just enough to cover expenses and a little extra. But it was proof. The concept worked. Charlotte took her to dinner to celebrate. "You're doing well. Better than I expected, honestly. Thanks for the vote of confidence." "I mean it. You've got instincts. The workers respect you. Production is up 20%. Charlotte raised her glass. "At this rate, you'll be a legitimate competitor within a year." "A competitor to whom?" "To everyone, including Blackthorn Industries." Elena paused, her glass halfway to her lips. "What? You didn't know? Rowan's family owns 3 textile mills. Larger operations than yours, but less efficient. You keep improving at this rate, you'll start cutting into his market share." She hadn't thought about that. Hadn't considered that building her own success might mean competing with her husband. Ex-husband? Almost ex-husband? She didn't even know what to call him anymore. "That's just business," Elena said finally. "Is it? Or is it revenge?" "I don't want revenge. I want independence." "Those aren't mutually exclusive." Charlotte studied her. "He hurt you. You hurt him back by succeeding without him. There's a poetry to that." Maybe there was. But as Elena lay in bed that night, she'd moved from the inn to a small house near the factory. She couldn't shake the feeling that success should feel better than this. She'd proven she didn't need Rowan. She'd built something real. She was surviving. So why did she still feel like she'd lost something irreplaceable? 4 months after leaving Blackthorn Manor, Elena received an invitation that changed everything. It was for the Winter Exhibition, an annual trade event where manufacturers displayed their products, made deals, and networked with buyers from across the country. Getting an invitation was prestigious. Attending could make or break a company. "You have to go," Charlotte insisted. "This is your chance to establish yourself as a serious player. It's also a chance to be publicly humiliated. Half the aristocracy will be there. Let them stare. You've got nothing to be ashamed of." Elena wasn't so sure, but Charlotte was right. This was too important an opportunity to pass up. The exhibition was held in London at a massive hall that had been converted into a showcase of Britain's industrial might. Elena arrived with samples of her best fabrics, a polished presentation, and nerves that threatened to eat through her composure. The first day went well. Buyers were interested. Other manufacturers were respectful, if distant. And if people whispered when she passed, well, she'd gotten used to that. The second day, Rowan showed up. Elena saw him from across the hall. Still tall, still imposing, still drawing eyes like gravity. He was touring the Blackthorn Industries display, all sleek machinery and expensive fabrics, surrounded by associates and admirers. He looked good, thinner, maybe, tired around the eyes, but fundamentally unchanged. Elena told herself she didn't care, turned back to her own display, focused on a potential buyer asking about thread counts. "The Duchess of Blackthorn." Lady Thornfield's voice cut through the conversation like a knife. "How industrious of you," Elena finished with the buyer before turning to face her. Rowan's aunt stood there in all her aristocratic glory, disapproval radiating from every pore. "Lady Thornfield, I must say, I never expected to see you here. Working." She said it like a curse. "It's rather beneath your station." "I don't have a station anymore. I gave it up when I left your nephew." "Did you? Because you're still using his title, still calling yourself Duchess." "Until the marriage is legally dissolved, it's accurate." "You want a divorce?" Lady Thornfield's eyes glittered. How modern, and how damaging to the Blackthorn name. "I'm sure Rowan will survive the scandal." "Will he? You've already humiliated him by leaving, by setting up this business venture. Do you have any idea what people are saying? that he couldn't control his own wife, that the great Duke of Blackthorn was abandoned by a nobody from a failing family? The words struck deeper than Elena wanted to admit. I didn't leave to hurt him. Didn't you? Then why compete with him? Why set up in textiles when you know that's Blackthorn business? Because it's what I know, what I'm good at. Or because you wanted to prove you didn't need him, wanted to wound his pride the way he wounded yours. Lady Thornfield leaned in. You think you've won by surviving on your own, but all you've done is declare war on a man who doesn't lose. This isn't a war. Everything is war to the Blackthorns. You should have learned that by now. She swept away, leaving Elena's hands shaking with anger and something uncomfortably close to fear. That night, back at her hotel, Elena couldn't sleep. Lady Thornfield's words played on repeat. You've declared war. Had she? She'd just been trying to survive, to build something of her own. But if Rowan saw it as competition, as challenge, a knock on her door made her jump. She opened it to find him standing there. Rowan, at her hotel, at midnight. We need to talk, he said. Every instinct screamed at her to slam the door. Instead, she stepped aside and let him in. He looked around the small room, nothing like the luxury of Blackthorn Manor, and something complicated crossed his face. You've been here 4 days, he said, in London, and you didn't tell me. Why would I? Because we're still married, because I've spent 4 months wondering if you were alive. You could have written. I did. 12 letters. You didn't answer any of them. Elena blinked. I never received any letters. I sent them to the inn. I moved out months ago. They stared at each other across the small room. Rowan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration she'd never seen from him before. My aunt spoke to you today. She did. Made it very clear that I'm an embarrassment to the family name. She had no right. She had every right. I am an embarrassment. A duchess running a factory? Society will never forgive it. I don't care what society thinks. Since when? Since my wife left me and I realized I'd rather have her respect than theirs. He took a step closer. I saw your display today. The fabrics, the production numbers. It's impressive. Thank you. I also saw that you're targeting the same markets as Blackthorn Industries, the same buyers, the same distribution channels. Here it was, the accusation. Is that a problem? It's smart. You identified a gap in the market and exploited it. That's good business. She hadn't expected that. Your aunt seems to think it's a declaration of war. My aunt thinks everything is a conspiracy against our family. Rowan moved to the window, staring out at London's lights. Can I ask you something? Why textiles? You could have chosen any industry, started over in something that didn't directly compete with me. Elena considered lying, considered saying it was just practical, just business. But she was tired of pretending. Because I needed to prove I could succeed in the one area where you'd already won. Needed to know that I wasn't just the failed duchess, that I had value beyond being your wife. He turned from the window. You always had value. You never showed it. I know. The admission was quiet, raw. I've spent 4 months thinking about what you said, about choosing, about what it means to let someone matter. He took a breath. I ended things with Vivian, formally, publicly. Made it clear there was never anything there except her ambition and my cowardice. Elena's heart stumbled. Why? Because you were right. I was using her as an excuse, a way to keep everyone at arm's length, including you, especially you. He crossed the room until he stood directly in front of her. I don't know if I can be what you need. Don't know if I can change enough. But I want to try. If you'll let me. Rowan, let me finish, please. His eyes met hers. Still that winter gray, but something had thawed. I've been dead inside since I was 12 years old. Since my mother died and my father taught me that feelings are weakness. I learned to compartmentalize everything, keep it all locked away where it couldn't hurt me. It worked for 20 years. Then you showed up and started fixing things. Started caring. Started looking at me like I was more than just the sum of my estates. And it terrified me. So you pushed me away. Yes, because letting you in meant risking everything I'd built. every wall, every defense. Easier to keep you at a distance than to face what it would mean if I lost you. And now? Now I've lost you anyway, and it's worse than anything I imagined. His voice cracked slightly. I want you to come home, Elena. Not because of duty or obligation, but because I... He stopped, swallowed, tried again. Because I can't breathe without you. Because the manor is a tomb, and I'm haunting it. Because I was wrong about everything. Elena felt tears burning behind her eyes. You hurt me. Do you understand that? Not just by keeping Vivian around, by making me feel like I was nothing, like I didn't matter. I know, and I'm sorry doesn't begin to cover it, but I'll spend the rest of my life proving you wrong, proving that you matter more than anything. He reached for her hand, hesitant, like he wasn't sure he had the right. Come home. Please. She wanted to. Wanted it with an intensity that scared her, but wanting wasn't enough. I can't. His face went white. Elena, I can't go back to being the Duchess in the tower, waiting for scraps of your attention. I've built something here, something that's mine, and I can't give that up. Not even for you. I'm not asking you to. Keep the factory. Keep your independence. Just come home at the end of the day. And if it doesn't work, if we can't make this marriage real, then at least we'll have tried. Together. He squeezed her hand. You said you needed me to choose you. I'm choosing you, Elena. Over my pride, my fear, my family's expectations. I'm choosing you. Now you have to choose whether to trust that. The room felt too small, the air too thin. Elena's mind raced through possibilities, consequences, risks. She could go back, try again, hope that this time would be different. Or she could protect herself, keep the life she'd built, stay safe. She was still trying to decide when shouting erupted from downstairs, then screaming, then the smell of smoke. Rowan's head snapped toward the door. What? The fire alarm started ringing, loud and insistent. Elena ran to the window. Below, in the exhibition hall attached to the hotel, orange flames were climbing up the Blackthorn Industries display, spreading to the neighboring booths with terrifying speed. The exhibition's on fire, she breathed. Rowan was already moving. We need to get out, now! They ran into the hallway. Other guests were emerging from rooms, confused and frightened. Smoke was beginning to seep up through the floorboards. Everyone down the stairs, Rowan shouted, quickly and calmly. But calm was impossible. Someone screamed, fire! And panic ignited faster than the flames. People pushed and shoved, trying to reach the main staircase. Elena let herself be swept along in the current, Rowan's hand gripping hers like a lifeline. They were almost to the stairs when she realized, Charlotte! She's in room 412. She won't know about the fire. Elena, we have to go. I'm not leaving her. She wrenched free and fought her way back through the crowd. Rowan cursed and followed. Room 412 was at the far end of the hall, smoke already thick in the air. Elena pounded on the door. Charlotte! Charlotte! Wake up! Fire! No answer. The door was locked. Rowan stepped back and kicked it. Once. Twice. On the third kick, the lock splintered. Charlotte was slumped in a chair by the window, an empty wine bottle beside her, completely unconscious. Help me get her up, Elena said. Together, they hauled Charlotte to her feet. She was a dead weight, barely conscious, mumbling something incoherent. Can you carry her? Elena asked. I'll manage. You lead the way. They made it back to the hallway. The smoke was worse now, thick and black, burning Elena's lungs. The main staircase was completely blocked by flames. The service stairs, she coughed. Back of the building. They stumbled through the smoke, Charlotte groaning between them. The heat was intense, the roar of flames like a living thing. Elena's eyes streamed tears. Her lungs screamed for clean air. The service stairs loomed ahead. They were almost there when a section of ceiling collapsed behind them, sending up a shower of sparks and burning debris. Go! Rowan shouted. Don't stop! Down the stairs, 3 flights of narrow steps, Charlotte dead weight between them. Elena's legs burned. Her vision tunneled. Just a little further, just a little... They burst out into the cold night air and collapsed on the pavement. Fire crews were arriving, pumping water, shouting orders. Guests huddled in groups, coughing and crying. The exhibition hall was an inferno, flames shooting through the roof. Elena watched her display burn. Everything she'd built, months of work, gone. Elena, Rowan's voice was rough from smoke. Are you hurt? She shook her head, unable to speak. Charlotte was coming around, coughing violently. What happened? Fire, Elena managed. You were unconscious. We got you out. You came back for me? Of course I did. Charlotte stared at her, then at Rowan, then back at the burning building. You're both insane. Probably, Rowan said. They sat there in the cold, watching the fire devour the exhibition hall. Everything Elena had worked for was in there. All her samples, her contracts, her carefully prepared displays. 4 months of progress. Gone in minutes. She should feel devastated. Should feel like the universe was punishing her for daring to succeed. Instead, she felt Rowan's hand find hers in the darkness. Felt Charlotte lean against her shoulder, still coughing, but alive. And she realized something. The factory was still standing. The machinery was still there. The workers, the contracts, the actual business, all still intact. She'd lost a display. Not the company. Not her future. We can rebuild, Charlotte said hoarsely, like she'd read Elena's mind. The exhibition was just one event. There'll be others. We don't have the capital. I'll front you more. Call it hazard pay for saving my life. Elena looked at Rowan. He was covered in soot, his expensive clothes ruined, his hair wild. He looked nothing like the cold, controlled duke she'd married. He looked human. I have capital too, he said quietly, if you'll accept it. Not as your husband, as an investor who believes in what you're building. That's not business. It's just business. You've proven the model works. It's a sound investment. He met her eyes. Let me help. Please. She should say no. Should keep everything separate, keep him at arm's length. But sitting there in the cold, watching flames eat through everything she'd built, Elena realized something else. She didn't want to do this alone anymore. All right, she said. Partners. Something shifted in Rowan's expression. Partners, he agreed. Then he pulled her close and kissed her. Not the cold, dutiful kiss at their wedding, something real, desperate and alive and tasting of smoke and possibility. When they broke apart, Charlotte was smirking. About damn time. Elena laughed, shocking herself, and leaned into Rowan's shoulder. The fire burned through the night. By dawn, the exhibition hall was a smoking ruin. 3 people had died, dozens injured. The damage was catastrophic. But as Elena stood watching the sun rise over the wreckage, Rowan's arm around her shoulders, Charlotte already making plans on her other side, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. They'd survived. And survival, she was learning, was just the first step. The journey back from London took 2 days. Elena rode in Rowan's carriage, not because she'd agreed to come home, but because Charlotte had commandeered her original transport and declared it too dangerous for Elena to travel alone after the fire. Too many questions, Charlotte had said, still hoarse from smoke. Investigators will want to know how it started. Who benefits? A duchess running a competing textile business shows up, and suddenly the Blackthorn display goes up in flames? That looks suspicious. I had nothing to do with it. I know that. You know that. But perception matters. Charlotte had gripped her hand. Go with him. Let people see you together. It'll quiet some of the rumors. So Elena sat across from Rowan as the countryside rolled past, the silence between them heavy with things unsaid. You don't have to come back to the manor, he said finally. I can take you to the factory. Or your house. Wherever you want. What do you want? The question seemed to catch him off guard. I want you home, but I'll settle for you being safe. Safe from what? From whoever set that fire. His jaw tightened. It wasn't an accident, Elena. The investigators found accelerant. Someone did this deliberately. Her stomach dropped. Who would? Competitors, business rivals, or someone trying to send a message. He met her eyes. The Blackthorn display was targeted specifically. Everything around it was collateral. You think someone's trying to hurt you? I think someone succeeded. 3 people died. My company's reputation is damaged, and the woman He stopped, started again. And you could have been killed. The raw fear in his voice did something to her chest, made it harder to maintain the walls she'd built. I wasn't, she said quietly. We got out. This time. The rest of the journey passed in tense silence. When they finally arrived at Blackthorn Manor, the gates looked different than Elena remembered. Less like a prison. More like what they actually were, just gates. Mrs. Crawford was waiting on the steps, her face carefully neutral until she saw Elena. Then something cracked. Your Grace, her voice shook. Welcome home. I'm not, Elena caught herself. I'm just visiting. Of course. Mrs. Crawford's expression said she didn't believe that for a second. Your chambers are ready. I've had them aired and cleaned weekly, just in case. Just in case she came back. Just in case this cold manor might become a home again. Elena followed Mrs. Crawford up the familiar stairs, down the familiar hallways to the chambers that had been her gilded cage. Nothing had changed. Same furniture, same curtains, same view of gardens now brown with winter. But something felt different. Smaller, maybe. Less oppressive. Lily's been beside herself, Mrs. Crawford said, setting down Elena's bag. She'll be thrilled you're back. I'm not back. Not permanently. If you say so, Your Grace. The older woman paused at the door. For what it's worth, the Duke hasn't been the same since you left. Hasn't hosted guests, hasn't gone to social functions, just works himself half to death and stares at your empty chair at dinner. Mrs. Crawford, I'm just saying, people change, sometimes even blackthorns. She left before Elena could respond. That night, Elena ate dinner alone in her chambers. Rowan had disappeared into his study with urgent business correspondence, leaving her to settle in. Or not settle in. She still hadn't decided. She was halfway through a meal she didn't taste when Lily knocked. Your Grace! Oh, I can't believe... The girl launched herself at Elena in a decidedly improper hug. You're really here! Just for a little while. That's what you think, Lily pulled back, grinning. The whole staff knows. The Duke's been impossible since you left. Snapping at everyone, working till dawn, looking like death. Mrs. Crawford says he even fired Mr. Pemberton for suggesting you might not come back. He fired his steward? Rehired him the next day, but still, it was dramatic. Lily started unpacking Elena's bag without asking. Everyone's hoping you'll stay. The manor needs you. The manor is a building. It doesn't need anything. You know what I mean. Did she? Elena wasn't sure anymore. Her anger at Rowan had dulled to something more complicated. The fire had stripped away pretense, left them both raw and honest in ways she hadn't expected. But honesty didn't erase months of pain, didn't undo the humiliation of being the unwanted wife, the abandoned duchess. She was still trying to untangle her feelings when someone knocked on the connecting door between her chambers and Rowan's. Lily's eyes went wide. That's the Duke's. I know where it goes. Elena's heart hammered. You can go, Lily. The maid left reluctantly, clearly hoping for gossip. Elena waited until her footsteps faded before calling out, Come in. Rowan opened the door slowly, like he wasn't sure of his welcome. He'd changed from his travel clothes into something simpler, just shirt and trousers, his hair still damp from washing away London's soot. He looked younger like this. More like the man he might have been if his father hadn't broken him. I wanted to check on you, he said. Make sure you had everything you needed. I'm fine. Good. That's good. He hovered in the doorway, neither in nor out. Elena, I know this is complicated. I know I don't have the right to ask anything of you, but I need you to know I meant what I said in London, all of it. Which part? The part where you want me back? Or the part where you'll invest in my company? Both, neither. I don't know. He ran a hand through his damp hair, frustrated. I'm not good at this, at talking about feelings, at being vulnerable. But I'm trying. Why now? Why after 4 months? Because 4 months of living without you taught me something I should have learned the day we married. That keeping everyone at arm's length doesn't make you strong. It just makes you alone. He stepped fully into the room. I was alone, Elena, even when we lived under the same roof, especially then, because I was too afraid to let you see who I really was. And who's that? Someone who's terrified of becoming his father. Someone who learned at 12 that caring about people just gives them power to hurt you. Someone who thought if he could just control everything, his business, his household, his marriage, he could avoid ever feeling that kind of pain again. How'd that work out? Spectacularly badly. A ghost of a smile. Turns out you can't control everything, and trying just pushes away the people who actually matter. Elena wanted to stay angry, wanted to hold on to the righteous fury that had fueled her escape, her survival, her success. But looking at him now, really looking, she saw what she'd missed before. The exhaustion, the guilt, the genuine fear that he'd destroyed something irreparable. "I don't know if I can trust you," she said quietly. "You hurt me, Rowan. Made me feel worthless. And I can't just forget that because you've had an epiphany." "I know, and I'm not asking you to forget. I'm asking for a chance to prove I can do better. Be better." He crossed the room until he stood in front of her. "I'll do whatever it takes. Move to your factory house if you want. Work alongside you. Submit to weekly interrogations about my whereabouts and activities. Whatever you need to feel safe. I need you to mean it, not just now when you're scared of losing me, but in 6 months, a year, 5 years, when the fear fades and old patterns come back. Then hold me accountable. Call me out when I slip. Don't let me get away with being the cold bastard I was trained to be." His hand found hers, careful, tentative. "I can't promise I'll be perfect. Can't promise I won't mess up. But I can promise I'll keep trying. Every single day." Elena looked down at their joined hands. His were larger, scarred from years of writing and estate work. Hers were stained with dye from the factory, calloused from labor she'd never imagined doing. They'd both changed. The question was whether they'd changed enough. 30 days, she heard herself say. What? 30 days. You get 1 month to prove this is real, that you can actually be the partner you're claiming you want to be. And at the end of 30 days, I'll decide if I'm staying. She pulled her hand back. But I'm not moving back into these chambers, and I'm not giving up the factory, and I'm not pretending we're some perfect couple for society's benefit. Agreed. What else? You don't make decisions about my business without consulting me. You don't disappear for weeks without explanation, and you don't ever, ever make me feel invisible again. Done. Just like that? Just like that. He stepped back, giving her space. I know you don't believe me yet, but I'll prove it. Starting tomorrow. After he left, Elena sat by the fire and tried to process what she'd just agreed to. 30 days. 1 month to see if a marriage built on ice could thaw into something real. She should feel scared. Instead, she felt oddly calm. If it didn't work, she'd leave. She'd proven she could survive on her own, build something from nothing. She didn't need him. But maybe, just maybe, she wanted him anyway. The next morning, Elena woke to find Rowan waiting in the breakfast room, not reading correspondence or working, just waiting for her. Good morning, she blinked. You're not working? I decided work can wait. We should talk about the fire. The investigation. They spent an hour going over what the authorities had found. The accelerant, the timing, the fact that the fire had started in the Blackthorn display and spread from there. They think it's a competitor, Rowan said. Someone trying to damage both our companies, or someone trying to damage you specifically, and I was collateral. Either way, we need to be careful. Whoever did this is dangerous. Should I go back to the factory, increase security there? I've already sent guards, discreet ones. He caught her look. I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to keep you alive. There's a difference. She wanted to argue, but he was right. Someone had committed murder to make a point. That wasn't a threat to take lightly. The next few days established a pattern. Rowan worked in the morning, but he took breaks to consult with Elena about estate business, genuinely asking her opinion instead of just informing her of decisions already made. They ate lunch together, reviewing factory reports and Blackthorn Industries updates. Afternoons, Rowan rode out to inspect properties while Elena handled correspondence and planning. Dinners were the hardest. Just the two of them at that enormous table, trying to find conversation that didn't revolve around business. Tell me about the factory, Rowan said one evening. What's it like? Actually working there, I mean. Not the finances. Elena considered deflecting, then decided honesty was the whole point of this experiment. It's loud and dirty. The machinery never stops clanking. The workers sing while they work. Folk songs, mostly. Inappropriate ones. She smiled at the memory. They were terrified of me at first. A duchess in their factory. But then I got dye on my dress and couldn't get a machine to work, and basically proved I was as clueless as they expected. After that, they started teaching me, showing me how things actually operated instead of just explaining from a distance. You enjoyed it? I did. I do. It's exhausting and frustrating and completely different from anything I was raised to do. But it's mine. I built it. That matters. Rowan was quiet for a moment. I envy that. What? The fact that you built something yourself. Everything I have was inherited. The manor, the businesses, the title. I've managed it, expanded it, but I didn't create it. It was just handed to me. You could build something new. Like what? I don't know. What would you build if you could start from nothing? He thought about it. Something sustainable, progressive. Maybe worker housing that's actually decent. Or schools for factory children. Something that improves lives instead of just extracting profit. Elena stared at him. You've thought about this before. I have ideas, but they're not practical, not profitable. What if they could be both? That started a conversation that lasted until midnight. Ideas building on ideas. Ways to structure businesses that benefited workers without sacrificing viability. Elena had experience with modern production methods. Rowan had capital and connections. Together, we could actually do this, Elena said, excited now. Create a model that other manufacturers could follow. It would take years and risk. So, we're already taking risks. Rowan smiled, a real smile, the first she'd seen from him. You're remarkable. You know that? The compliment caught her off guard. Made heat flood her cheeks. I'm practical. You're both. He reached across the table, palm up. An invitation, not a demand. Elena looked at his hand, looked at him, saw the man he was trying to become instead of the one he'd been. She took his hand. That night, for the first time since she'd returned, Elena didn't retreat to her separate chambers immediately after dinner. Instead, she and Rowan walked through the manor's portrait gallery, looking at centuries of stern blackthorns. That's my father, Rowan said, stopping before a painting of a hard-faced man in formal dress. The Duke before me. You look like him. I know, I hate it. He moved to the next portrait, a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. That's my mother. She's beautiful. She was. Kind, too. Too kind for a family like ours. His voice went flat. My father broke her, systematically. Every time she showed warmth or compassion, he punished it, called it weakness, said blackthorns don't have the luxury of soft hearts. How did she die? Officially, a riding accident. But she'd been trying to leave, packed her things, made plans. My father found out. Rowan's hand tightened on the frame. 3 days later, she was dead. They said the horse spooked, but I was 12, not stupid. I knew what happened. Elena's breath caught. Your father killed her? Orchestrated it at least, made sure she couldn't escape, couldn't take me with her, couldn't leave him. He finally looked away from the portrait. After she died, he sat me down and explained that this was what happened when blackthorns showed weakness, when they let love make them vulnerable. He spent the next 8 years training that lesson into me. I'm so sorry. Don't be. I survived. Just became the man he wanted instead of the one she raised me to be. His laugh was bitter. And then I married you and did exactly what he did. Kept you at arm's length. Crushed every attempt you made to connect. Became the thing I swore I'd never be. You're not your father, Rowan. How do you know? Because you're here, trying to change. Your father would never have admitted fault, never apologized, never chased a carriage because he couldn't bear to lose someone. She touched his arm. You're not him. You're just damaged by him. There's a difference. He turned to face her fully. I don't want to damage you too. Then don't. Choose differently. I'm trying. I know. They stood there in the portrait gallery, surrounded by dead blackthorns and the weight of history, and for the first time Elena felt like maybe, just maybe, they could break the cycle. 2 weeks into the 30-day trial, Charlotte arrived at the manor. "Don't look so shocked," she said, sweeping into the entrance hall with her usual confidence. "I'm checking on my investment, both of them." She meant the factory and Elena, possibly in that order. Over tea, Charlotte grilled Rowan with the subtlety of a tax auditor. "So, you've convinced Elena to give you another chance. What's your plan?" "To not waste it." "Specifics, please." "I'm being transparent about my business dealings, consulting Elena on major decisions, actually being present instead of disappearing for weeks." "And Vivian Ashford?" Rowan didn't flinch. "I ended that publicly. Made it clear there was never anything there except her ambition. She's not happy, but she'll survive." "She's spreading rumors," Charlotte said bluntly, "saying you're bewitched, that Elena trapped you with factory profits and false accusations." "Let her talk. Anyone who knows me knows that's nonsense. The people who know you think you're an ice-hearted bastard. Her version isn't that far off from their expectations." Elena set down her tea. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying perception matters. Right now, society sees Rowan as the wronged husband, graciously taking back his wayward wife. If you want respect, real respect, you need to change that narrative." "How?" Charlotte smiled. "By being visible. Together. Showing that this isn't a duchess crawling back in shame. It's a partnership of equals. Society will never accept. Society accepts what we make them accept. Trust me." The opportunity came faster than expected. Lord Ashford, Vivian's father, was hosting a New Year's ball. The invitation arrived addressed to both Rowan and Elena. "We don't have to go," Rowan said. "Yes, we do." Elena studied the invitation. "Charlotte's right. We need to control the narrative, and hiding makes us look weak." "You're sure?" "No, but I'm going anyway." The ball was 3 days away. Elena spent the intervening time preparing, not just her appearance, but her armor. She'd learned to survive in hostile environments. This would be no different. The night of the ball, she dressed in a gown of midnight blue, the same color Vivian had worn at the last ball, but infinitely more elegant. Her hair was swept up, exposing her neck and the Blackthorn family diamonds Rowan had insisted she wear. "You look like a duchess," Rowan said when she descended the stairs. "I am a duchess, whether I want to be or not." "Do you? Want to be?" Elena considered. "I want to be your partner. The title is just paperwork." Something shifted in his expression. "You're extraordinary. Remember that when Vivian tries to embarrass us?" The Ashford estate blazed with light and music. Carriages lined the drive, depositing the cream of society onto the steps. Elena felt Rowan tense beside her as they entered. "Together," she murmured. "Together." They were announced. Every head turned. The whispers started immediately, a rustle of gossip that swept through the ballroom like wind through wheat. The Duchess of Blackthorn, back with her husband, looking radiant, looking powerful, looking dangerous. Lady Ashford greeted them with poisoned courtesy. "Duke Blackthorn, and the Duchess. How lovely you could attend." "We wouldn't miss it," Elena said smoothly. "Of course. I'm sure everyone's eager to see you both." Her smile sharpened. Together. They moved into the crowd. Elena felt the weight of every stare, every whispered comment, but she kept her head high, her hand steady on Rowan's arm. Vivian appeared within minutes, dressed to kill in scarlet silk. "Rowan, how domestic of you to bring your wife." "Vivian," his voice was coldly polite. "You look well." "Do I? I've been devastated since you ended our friendship." She didn't even glance at Elena. "Such an abrupt decision. One might almost think you'd been pressured." "One would be wrong. I made that decision myself because it was the right thing to do." "For whom? Certainly not for us." "There was never an us, Vivian. There was you pursuing me, and me being too cowardly to shut it down properly. I'm correcting that mistake." Her face went white with fury. "I see. And does your Duchess know about all the other mistakes you've made?" "She knows everything that matters." Rowan's hand found Elena's. Now, if you'll excuse us, I'd like to dance with my wife." He led Elena to the dance floor, leaving Vivian seething in their wake. "That was brutal," Elena said as they began to waltz. She needed to hear it. Everyone did. He pulled her closer. "I'm done letting people think you're anything less than essential to me." "Rowan, I love you." The world stopped. Music kept playing, couples kept dancing, but Elena couldn't hear any of it through the roaring in her ears. "What?" "I love you. I should have said it in London, should have said it months ago, but I'm saying it now." His eyes held hers. "I love your strength, your intelligence, the way you fix problems instead of complaining about them, the way you looked at me like I could be more than my worst instincts. I love you, Elena, and I'm terrified I've realized it too late." She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stare at him while her heart tried to climb out of her chest. "Say something," he said quietly. "Even if it's no, even if it's too late, just say something." Around them, the ballroom had gone quiet. People were staring openly now, watching this very public declaration. Elena looked at Rowan, really looked, saw the fear in his eyes, the hope, the desperate vulnerability of a man who'd finally learned to feel. "Ask me again in 30 days, she said. "What?" "You're on trial, remember? You don't get to skip to the end just because you said the right words." "Elena." "But for the record?" She let herself smile. "I'm starting to think you might actually mean it." Relief crashed over his face. He pulled her close right there on the dance floor and kissed her in front of everyone. The ballroom erupted in whispers, scandal, shock, delight. Elena didn't care. She kissed him back and felt something inside her finally, completely heal. When they broke apart, she saw Lady Morrison watching from the edge of the floor. The older woman's expression was complicated, disapproval warring with something that might have been respect. Then, slowly, deliberately, Lady Morrison raised her glass in a small salute. Elena returned the gesture, an acknowledgement, a truce, maybe even the beginning of acceptance. The rest of the ball passed in a blur. People approached, some hostile, some curious, many genuinely congratulatory. Charlotte appeared to crow about being right. Lord Ashford apologized for his daughter's behavior. Through it all, Rowan stayed at Elena's side. Not controlling, not managing, just present. A partner in every sense of the word. They left before midnight, unwilling to endure more scrutiny. In the carriage home, Elena let herself lean against Rowan's shoulder. "That was exhausting. You were magnificent. We were magnificent. Together." His arm came around her. 15 days left in your trial. What happens if I pass?" "Then I guess you get to keep your wife." "And if I fail?" Elena was quiet for a long moment. "Then I leave. For real this time. No second chances." "Fair enough." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "I won't fail." Confident. Determined. When they reached the manor, Elena made a decision. Instead of retreating to her separate chambers, she followed Rowan to his. "Elena, I'm not ready to share a bed yet, but I'm tired of separate wings. We can sleep in the same room without everything else." "Are you sure?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." They changed in awkward silence, backs turned for modesty. When Elena emerged from the dressing room in her nightgown, Rowan was already in bed, carefully on his side, leaving her plenty of space. She climbed in, and he immediately turned down the lamp. Darkness. Silence. Two people in a bed learning to be together. "Thank you," Rowan said quietly. "For what?" "For giving me this chance, for not writing me off, for being brave enough to try." Elena reached across the space between them, found his hand. "Thank you for finally being worth the effort." His laugh was quiet in the dark. "I'll work on being worth it more consistently." "See that you do." She fell asleep holding his hand, and for the first time in months, she didn't dream of running away. The 15th day of the trial arrived with unseasonable warmth, a January thaw that turned the manor's frost-covered grounds into mud and melting snow. Elena woke to find Rowan already gone, a note on his pillow. "Meeting with the fire investigators, back by noon. Don't let me miss lunch. R." She smiled despite herself. 2 weeks of him keeping promises, showing up, choosing her. 2 weeks of slow, careful reconstruction. It felt fragile, like something that could shatter if she breathed wrong, but it also felt real. Elena dressed and headed to the breakfast room, where Mrs. Crawford had laid out correspondence that needed attention. Estate business, social invitations, a letter from Charlotte with updates on the factory. She was halfway through reviewing tenant contracts when Lily rushed in, face flushed. "Your Grace, there's a man here. Says he needs to speak with you urgently. About the fire." Elena's stomach tightened. "Send him in." The man who entered was young, nervous, dressed in clothes that suggested he was working class, trying to look respectable. He twisted his cap in his hands. "Your Grace, I'm Thomas Brennan. I worked for Blackthorn Industries at the London warehouse." "Sit down, Mr. Brennan. You look ready to collapse." He sat, perched on the edge of the chair like he might bolt any second. "I shouldn't be here. If anyone finds out I talked to you, no one will find out. You have my word." Elena poured him tea he didn't drink. "What about the fire?" "I know who started it." The words came out in a rush. "I know, because I was supposed to help. They offered me money, £100, to let them into the warehouse the night before the exhibition. Said they just needed to move some inventory, but I got suspicious and followed them." "Who's them?" "2 men I'd never seen before, but they were working for someone. I heard them talking about orders from the lady." He finally met her eyes. "I saw what they did, saw them douse the Blackthorn display with accelerant, plant devices that would spark it, and I did nothing, just took their money and pretended I didn't see." Elena's hands gripped the armrests. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because 3 people died. And I can't live with that." His voice cracked. "I thought it was just property damage. Thought nobody would get hurt. But then the fire spread and people—" He broke off, shaking. "I came to turn myself in, but I wanted you to know first. Wanted you to know it wasn't random." "Do you know who the lady was?" "No. But the men mentioned something about textile competition, about someone wanting to eliminate rivals before they got too powerful." A chill ran down Elena's spine. Someone targeting textile competitors. Someone with enough money to hire professionals. Someone who stood to benefit from both Blackthorn Industries and Elena's factory being damaged. "Thank you for telling me," she said quietly. "Wait here. I need to send for the investigators." She found Mrs. Crawford and dispatched her to fetch the authorities. Then she returned to Mr. Brennan, who looked like he might be sick. "What will happen to me?" "I don't know, but you did the right thing coming forward." "Will that matter?" "It should. It has to." Rowan returned just as the investigators arrived. Elena pulled him aside and explained quickly. She watched his face go from confusion to fury to something cold and calculating. "A lady with textile interests," he said. "Someone who'd benefit from us both failing." "That describes half the aristocracy." "No, it describes someone specific." His jaw tightened. "Someone who's been vocal about the dangers of women in business. Who's complained publicly about your factory setting a bad precedent." Elena's stomach dropped. "Lady Morrison." "Her family owns 3 textile mills. Traditional operations, losing ground to modernization. If she could eliminate competition while making an example of you, proving that women shouldn't be in business, she'd solve multiple problems at once." It made terrible sense. Lady Morrison's hostility, her pointed comments about Elena's impropriety, her investment in seeing Elena fail. The investigators questioned Mr. Brennan for over an hour, took his statement, his description of the men, every detail he could remember. When they finished, they turned to Elena and Rowan. "This is useful," the lead investigator said, "but it's not proof. We need to connect those men to whoever hired them. Without that, it's just hearsay." "Then find the connection," Rowan said, his voice hard. "Use whatever resources you need. I'll pay for it." "Your Grace, 3 people died. My wife could have died. Find who did this." After they left, taking Mr. Brennan with them, Elena and Rowan stood in the now empty breakfast room. The morning's warmth had fled, leaving only cold fury. "We need to be careful," Elena said. "If Lady Morrison did this, she's dangerous, desperate." She should be. Because if she thinks she can hurt you and get away with it, Rowan, we have to be smart about this, not reckless. He looked at her, something fierce in his eyes. I've spent my whole life being smart, being controlled. Right now I want to find the person who tried to kill you and make them pay. I know, but we do this right. We get proof. We use the law. She touched his arm. We win by being better than her, not by sinking to her level. He took a breath, then another. The cold fury banked slightly. You're right. You're always right. Not always, but on this? Yes. They spent the rest of the day coordinating with the investigators. By evening, they had a plan. Track the hired men through London's criminal networks, offer immunity to whoever talked first, build a case that would hold up in court. It would take time, but they had something Lady Morrison didn't know about. Mr. Brennan, a witness who could identify the men and testify to what he'd heard. That night, Elena and Rowan sat by the fire in his chambers, exhausted and tense. 15 days, Elena said. That's how long you have left. I know. Are you worried? Terrified. But not about the trial, about whoever's trying to hurt us. We'll handle it, together. He pulled her close, and she let herself lean into his warmth. When this is over, he said quietly, when we've dealt with whoever set that fire, and you've decided whether to stay, what do you want? What do I want? For us, for your life. What would make you happy? Elena thought about it. I want the factory to succeed. I want to prove that women can build businesses and compete and win. I want to change how people think about what's possible. She paused. And I want a partner who sees me as an equal. Not property, not a decoration, a partner. You have that. You've had it since the day you walked away from me and I realized what an idiot I'd been. Have I, or am I still on trial? You were never on trial, Elena. I was. And I'll spend the rest of my life proving I passed. She turned in his arms to face him. What if you fail? What if something happens and you revert to the cold bastard you were trained to be? Then you call me on it. Remind me who I want to be instead of who my father made me. Don't let me get away with being less than you deserve. That's a lot of work. I know, and I'm asking you to do it anyway, because I love you, and I'm finally brave enough to say it without waiting for your answer. Elena studied his face, the sharp angles softened by firelight, the winter eyes warmed by something that looked like hope. Ask me again, she said. When the 30 days are up. Why wait? Because I want to give you a fair chance. Want to make sure this isn't just fear or guilt talking. It's not prove it. 15 more days, then ask me. He kissed her instead of arguing, and Elena kissed back, feeling the last of her walls begin to crack. The investigation moved faster than expected. Within a week, the authorities had tracked down one of the hired men, a career arsonist named Davies, who'd done jobs for wealthy clients all over London. Faced with hanging, he talked. He gave them names, dates, the amount he'd been paid, and the identity of the woman who'd hired him. Elena was at the factory when Rowan's messenger arrived. She read the note twice, disbelief warring with vindication. Not Lady Morrison. Lady Thornfield, Rowan's aunt, the woman who'd been so insistent that Elena know her place, who'd warned her about embarrassing the family, who'd been hostile from the moment Elena entered Blackthorn Manor. Your Grace? One of the workers approached cautiously. Is everything all right? Elena looked up from the note, her mind racing. I need to go, too. Can you manage without me? Of course, we've got production covered. She took Rowan's carriage straight to the manor, bursting through the doors to find him in his study with the investigators. Is it true? Rowan's face was carved from stone. According to Davies, yes. My aunt hired him and another man to destroy the Blackthorn display. She hoped it would damage my business enough to force me to focus on traditional operations instead of, he gestured vaguely, whatever modern ideas you'd been giving me. Why? Because she's been embezzling from the estate for years, using profits to fund her lifestyle while claiming it's all legitimate expenses. Rowan's voice was cold, controlled. When you started reviewing the accounts, you got too close. She knew it was only a matter of time before you found the evidence, so she tried to eliminate the problem. By burning down the exhibition? by making both our businesses look unstable, dangerous investments. She thought it would drive you away again and force me back into the traditional blackthorn mold, too busy with basic survival to look closely at where the money was going. Elena sank into a chair. She killed 3 people over embezzlement? She killed 3 people because she's desperate and ruthless and willing to do whatever it takes to protect her position. Rowan looked at the investigators. What happens now? Now we arrest her. She'll stand trial for arson, murder, and theft. The evidence is substantial. Do it. They found Lady Thornfield in her chambers, already packing. Someone must have warned her, but she didn't run, just stood there as the investigators read the charges, her face a mask of aristocratic disdain. You're making a mistake, she said. I am a blackthorn. You cannot arrest me on the word of criminals. We can when we have evidence. Financial records, witness testimony, a confession from your hired man. The lead investigator gestured to his colleagues. Lady Thornfield, you're under arrest. She looked at Rowan. You would do this to me. Your own family. You tried to kill my wife. I tried to save this family from ruin, from scandal, from the disaster of a duchess who works like a common laborer and gives you modern ideas that will destroy everything your father built. Her composure cracked. I did this for the Blackthorn name. You did this for yourself, for money and power and the preservation of a system that should have died with my father. Rowan's voice was ice. You're not protecting the family. You're what's destroying it. They took her away in chains. The manor staff watched in shocked silence as Lady Thornfield, always so proper, so concerned with appearances, was let out like a common criminal. After she was gone, Elena found Rowan standing in the portrait gallery, staring at his father's painting. She learned from him, Rowan said without turning. My father taught her that the family name mattered more than anything, more than decency, more than human life. And she believed it so completely she was willing to kill to protect it. That's not your fault, isn't it? I was raised the same way, taught the same lessons. If you hadn't pushed back, if you hadn't forced me to question everything I'd been taught, I could have become her. Could have been so focused on protecting the Blackthorn legacy that I forgot to be human. Elena moved to stand beside him. But you didn't. You chose differently. Only because you gave me a reason to. No, because you wanted to change. I was just the catalyst. He turned to face her. 30 days are almost up. I know. Have I passed your trial? Elena looked at him, this man who'd been so cold, so controlled, so locked away, who'd learned to feel again, to trust, to love. Ask me tomorrow, she said, on the actual 30th day. You're going to make me sweat it out until the last minute? I'm going to make sure you mean it when you ask. He pulled her close, and she let him. Let herself feel safe in his arms. Let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, they'd actually survive this. The 30th day dawned clear and cold, real winter finally settling in after the brief thaw. Elena woke alone, Rowan's side of the bed already empty. She found a note on the pillow. Meet me in the conservatory at noon. R. Elena dressed carefully, nerves and anticipation warring in her chest. This was it, the moment she'd decide whether to stay or leave, whether this marriage could become something real, whether Rowan had truly changed or if she'd just been fooling herself. At noon, she made her way to the conservatory. The door was propped open, and she could hear voices inside, not just Rowan, but others. She stepped through and stopped. The conservatory was filled with people. Mrs. Crawford, Lily, Charlotte, workers from her factory, Rowan's business associates. Even Lord Ashford, looking uncomfortable but present. And at the center of it all stood Rowan, holding a single white rose. What is this? Witnesses, he said. I wanted everyone who matters to both of us to be here, because what I'm about to ask you shouldn't be private. It should be public, acknowledged, real. He crossed the space between them and took her hand. 30 days ago, you gave me a trial, a chance to prove I could be the partner you deserved. I've tried. I know I haven't been perfect. I've slipped into old patterns, been too controlling, forgotten to ask instead of telling. But every time, you've called me on it, reminded me to do better. And I have. Because of you. Rowan, let me finish, please. He took a breath. The day we married, I told you not to expect warmth from this marriage. I was cruel and cold and so determined to protect myself that I couldn't see what I was destroying. I thought keeping you at a distance would keep me safe. Instead, it just made me alone. Around them, people were silent, listening, bearing witness. You left me because I gave you no choice, because I made our marriage a prison instead of a partnership. And when you walked away, something in me broke. I saw what I was, what I'd become, and I hated it. Hated myself for pushing away the one person who tried to see me as more than just the Duke of Blackthorn. He sank to his knees, still holding her hand. Elena's breath caught. Around them, people gasped. So I'm asking you now, in front of everyone who matters to us both, not as your husband, I already had that chance and wasted it, but as a man who loves you, who respects you, who wants to spend the rest of his life earning the right to stand beside you. Rowan, get up. Not until you answer. Elena Blackthorn, will you give me another chance? Not 30 days. Forever. Will you stay with me and let me prove every single day that you matter more than anything? Tears were streaming down Elena's face. She looked at him. This proud man on his knees. This duke who'd finally learned to be vulnerable, and felt the last of her walls crumble. Yes, she said. Yes, you idiot. Of course, yes. He stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her while the conservatory erupted in applause. Charlotte was crying. Mrs. Crawford was smiling. Even Lord Ashford looked moved. When they broke apart, Rowan pressed the white rose into her hand. This is from the same bush your grandmother had in her garden, the one you stood in front of on our wedding day. I had it transplanted here, so you'd always have a piece of home. Elena couldn't speak, could only hold the rose and cry while Rowan held her, and everyone who'd witnessed her journey from prisoner to partner celebrated around them. Later, after the witnesses had left and the conservatory was quiet again, Elena and Rowan sat among the plants, her head on his shoulder. What happens now? She asked. We keep working, keep building, keep choosing each other. He pressed a kiss to her hair. And maybe we actually become the partnership we should have been from the start. I want to expand the factory, hire more workers, maybe open a second location. I want to fund worker housing, better conditions, show other manufacturers there's a different way. We'll need capital for all that. We have capital. Between your profits and my estates, if we're actually partners, we pool resources, right? Elena sat up to look at him. You'd do that? Invest in my business as an equal partner? I'd do that and more. What's mine is yours. Actually yours, not just legally on paper. We succeed together or not at all. She kissed him. I love you. I should have said it before, but I'm saying it now. I love you, Rowan Blackthorn. Even though I was a cold bastard who didn't deserve you, especially because you learned to be better. Over the next months, they rebuilt everything. The factory expanded. Workers' housing was constructed. Clean, safe, affordable. Production increased. Profits grew. Blackthorn Industries and Harrow Textiles merged into a single entity, Blackthorn and Harrow, with Elena and Rowan as equal partners. The aristocracy was scandalized. The business community was intrigued. Workers were hopeful. Charlotte called it brilliant. You've created something genuinely new, a company where profit and people matter equally. Everyone's going to copy you. Good, Elena said. Let them. Rising tide lifts all boats. Lady Thornfield stood trial and was convicted. Sentenced to 20 years for arson and murder. Rowan attended the sentencing but didn't speak to her. Some poisons ran too deep to cure. Vivian Ashford married a banker and moved to Scotland. Oops. She wrote Elena a letter, not apologizing exactly, but acknowledging that perhaps she'd misjudged the situation. Elena burned it and moved on. The real changes were smaller, personal. Rowan learned to ask instead of demand, to consult instead of dictate, to see Elena as a partner in everything, business, estate management, life. Elena learned to trust him, to believe that when he said he'd changed, he meant it, to let herself be vulnerable without fear. They fought sometimes, had disagreements about strategy, about money, about how to handle difficult workers or suppliers. but they fought as equals, and they always chose to work through it instead of shutting down. 1 year after the fire, they stood together at a ribbon-cutting ceremony for the new worker housing development. 50 families would move into clean, modern homes, the first of many such projects they'd planned. "Speech," someone called from the crowd. Elena looked at Rowan. He gestured for her to go ahead. She stepped forward. "A year ago, I was told that women don't belong in business, that we're too emotional, too weak, too impractical to succeed. I was told my factory would fail, that my marriage was a scandal, that I should accept my place and stop trying to change things." She paused, looking at the workers who'd believed in her, at Charlotte, who'd invested in her, at Rowan, who'd learned to love her. "I'm here to tell you that the people who say you can't change things are wrong, that the systems that claim to be unchangeable aren't, that partnerships built on respect instead of power can work, that women are just as capable as men, and that anyone who tells you otherwise is either lying or scared." Applause rippled through the crowd. "This housing is just the beginning. We're going to keep building, keep improving, keep proving that business doesn't have to exploit workers to succeed, that profit and decency aren't mutually exclusive, that change is possible if you're willing to fight for it." More applause. Rowan was smiling at her, proud, genuine, real. "Thank you for believing in us, for working with us, for being part of something bigger than any one person. Together, we're going to change how industry works in this country. Together, we're unstoppable." The crowd erupted. Elena stepped back and Rowan pulled her into his arms. "That was perfect," he said. "We're not perfect. We're just trying. That's all anyone can do." 5 years later, Blackthorn Manor had transformed. The cold, unwelcoming fortress had become something warmer. The portrait gallery still held stern blackthorns, but now it also held paintings of Elena, of workers, of the projects they'd built together. The conservatory was Elena's sanctuary, filled with plants she tended herself, a place where she could think and plan and escape when the business demanded too much. The factories, there were 3 now, ran smoothly, employing hundreds. The worker housing had expanded to multiple locations. Other manufacturers were starting to copy the model, improving conditions across the industry. Society had eventually, grudgingly, accepted Elena. Some aristocrats still sneered, but most had learned that the Duchess of Blackthorn was a force to be reckoned with, that dismissing her was a mistake, and Rowan had kept his promise. Every single day, he chose her. Sometimes it was easy, mornings drinking coffee while reviewing reports, evenings planning new projects. Sometimes it was hard, disagreements about strategy, moments when old patterns threatened to resurface. But he always chose her, and she always chose him back. On a spring morning, Elena stood in the conservatory, watching workers arrive at the manor for a quarterly meeting. Rowan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Happy?" She leaned back against him. "Very." "Any regrets?" "Only that I didn't leave you sooner, force you to change faster. If you'd left sooner, I might not have been ready to change." "True. Timing matters." They stood there watching the sunrise paint the gardens gold. 2 people who'd been strangers at an altar and had learned to become partners. "I love you," Rowan said. "I know." "Still?" "Always." In the end, Elena Blackthorn didn't just survive the prison of her marriage. She broke it open from the inside, rebuilt it into something worth living in, and proved that even the coldest hearts could learn to feel. The manor that had once felt like a tomb became a home. The husband who'd been carved from ice became a partner. And the girl who'd married to save her family became a woman who changed an industry. Not because she was perfect, not because she never stumbled or doubted or made mistakes, but because she was brave enough to demand more, strong enough to walk away, and wise enough to come back when coming back was worth it. The story of the Duke's frozen heart wasn't a fairy tale. It was messier than that, more complicated, more human. It was the story of 2 broken people learning to heal each other, of a marriage that started as a prison and became a partnership, of a woman who refused to disappear and a man who learned to see her. And in the end, that was more powerful than any fairy tale could ever be, because it was real. Years later, when people asked Elena how she'd survived, how she'd turned a loveless marriage into something genuine, she always gave the same answer. I stopped waiting for him to save me. I saved myself. Then I gave him the chance to catch up. And Rowan, when asked the same question, would smile and say, I learned that the strongest thing I could do wasn't to control everything. It was to trust someone enough to let them in, to choose love over fear, to fall to my knees and ask for another chance. They'd built an empire together, changed an industry, proved that partnerships based on respect could not only survive but thrive. But the real victory was simpler than that. They'd learned to love each other, truly, completely, without walls or conditions or fear. And in a world that had taught them both that love was weakness, that had broken them and tried to keep them broken, that was the most radical act of all.